Chapter 228. Mo Xiaoyao paused and shook his head with a smile. No, it's delicious. Yi Li nodded with satisfaction. Her cooking skills were not that good, but cooking some home-cooked dishes and porridge was not difficult for her. The chicken porridge took her 2 hours to cook. She tasted it herself and found that the taste was acceptable. Does Miss Li have something to say to me? Mo Xiaoyao put down the bowl in his hand and asked when he saw Yi Li's eyes staring at him. Yi Li took the bowl and filled it with porridge for him. She said, I personally think that it's not good to force yourself to do everything alone. It's also not the way husband and wife should get along. What do you think, Prince? Mo Xiaoyao helplessly took the bowl from her and sighed, you know. Miss Li, it's not because of you. You know, the poison in my body can't be cured for now. It's only a matter of time before I reach this step. Whether it's because of me or not, isn't it already like this? What I'm saying is, Prince, aren't you afraid that you'll kill yourself by locking yourself in the room? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked. I won't. Mo Xiaoyao said, I won't die. The phoenix grass won't kill me. Mr. Shen also said that it will only make me feel a little pain. Just feel a little pain. Yi Li couldn't help but want to pry open his head to see what was inside. Miss Li, you know that this is the best situation for now. If Mr. Shen doesn't bring back the phoenix grass, then he wouldn't be able to help Yonglin in time. Shattered snow paths would be broken and the people of Nanzhao would enter. Miss Li, I'll accompany you in the future. Yi Li said lightly. Okay. Under a big tree in the courtyard, Mo Xiaoyao leaned against the tree and sat leisurely. His gentle gaze fell on the slender woman in the courtyard who was reaching out with her hand. A gleaming dagger flickered in and out of Yi Li's hand. Her nimble body shuttled between the wooden figurines in all sorts of postures. In just a short moment, all of the wooden figurines had obvious wounds on their necks and chests. Yi Li's performance was not very enjoyable. Instead, it was filled with a biting cold murderous intent. But in the eyes of the people in the courtyard, it was more captivating than any dance in the world. The shadow guards hiding in the shadows could not help but secretly swipe at their necks, wondering if they could dodge the dagger in Wang Fei's hand. Feng Zhiyao, who rarely had free time, also couldn't help but peek at Mo Xiaoyao, who was sitting under the tree with a calm and even gentle expression. He cursed inside, of all the noble misses, to be able to choose such a vicious Wang Fei for the prince, the emperor's eyes must be very bad. Li Wang's action of breaking off the engagement was correct. Otherwise, he would have been beaten to death by Wang Fei. Yi Li put away the dagger in her hand and furrowed her brow. She was clearly dissatisfied. She turned and walked towards where Mo Xiaoyao was sitting under the tree. Miss Li's internal power is slightly lacking, but her close combat skills are very good. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said with a slight smile. However, internal power could not be recovered in a short period of time. With Miss Li's status, there were not many experts that needed her to fight. At least, Yi Li's present skills were far beyond Mo Xiaoyao's expectations. Yi Li nodded slightly and said with a frown, lacking internal power is a weakness. I will think of another way. As for encountering a top expert, I will think about it later. Feng Zhiyao looked with slight terror at her. Wang Fei, are you telling me that with your skills, you can think of a way to deal with a top expert? Yi Li propped up her chin and said, that depends on how high the expert is. If one palm can destroy a house 10 zhang away, then it may be difficult. Feng Zhiyao looked at the sky and rolled his eyes. Who has ever seen an expert that defies the natural order? It's impossible to reach that level, all right? What did she think power was? To be able to break a large tree with one palm was already a very high level of internal power, but to destroy a house 10 zhang away? Yi Li nodded seriously and said, I also feel that there shouldn't be such an ability. Feng Zhiyao asked curiously, then how does Wang Fei want to deal with a top expert? Yi Li blinked and said calmly, with my own strength, it may be difficult to deal with an expert like Prince. However, it shouldn't be a problem to escape unharmed. As she spoke, Yi Li couldn't help but look at Imo Xiaoyao. As a person who had been disabled for almost 10 years, even if Imo Xiaoyao's martial arts hadn't deteriorated, it should have stopped at 17 or 18 years old. But she had discovered in the past few days that Imo Xiaoyao's martial arts were still unfathomably deep. At least, she didn't have any chance of winning against him. This made Yi Li, who had always been very confident in her own skills, feel slightly depressed. Feng Zhiyao didn't know what expression to make. What's with your depressed and regretful face? Do you think there are many people who can escape unharmed from Prince? If it's like this, then Wang Fei's skills are enough. After all, there are no more than 3 people in the world who can compare to Prince in martial arts, Feng Zhiyao said. Which 3? Yi Li asked curiously. Feng Zhiyao rubbed his nose and said, Yanwang Chamber's Great Pavilion Master Ling Taihan, Shiling Genom of Gojoseon, and our Dechu State's #1 expert Mu Qingcang. However, Genom of Gojoseon lost an arm on the battlefield, so his martial arts may have deteriorated. However, these people probably won't make a move against Wang Fei, so there's no need to worry. Yi Li rolled her eyes at him and said, I don't have a persecutory delusion. Increasing my own strength has nothing to do with whether or not someone will make a move against me. Feng Zhiyao couldn't help but wipe his sweat. You still want to increase your strength? If you need anything, just have someone do it. If you need people, you can just transfer them from the Shadow Guard and the Black Cloud Cavalry. Imo Xiaoyao said softly. Since the future was destined to not be peaceful, he did not object to Yi Li using any method to increase her own strength. Even if it was just to protect herself, an extra bit of strength meant an extra bit of safety. Feng Zhiyao looked at Imo Xiaoyao with slight surprise and raised an eyebrow. It seemed that Prince truly placed great importance on this Wang Fei. At least, the amount of authority he gave Wang Fei could be said to be the highest in the history of Princess Ding other than the first Ding country Wang Fei. No, perhaps it was not any worse than the first Princess Ding because the prince had almost tacitly given Wang Fei all authority over the Black Cloud Cavalry. Reporting to Prince, Wang Fei. General Morong requests an audience. Also, the reinforcements from the court have arrived, the guard at the gate reported. Feng Zhiyao raised an eyebrow. They are not slow. Which general is leading them? The guard reported, it is General Lu Jingyun, the emperor's newly appointed bandit suppressing general. Imo Xiaoyao said lightly, let them in. The guard hesitated and then said, General Lu has not entered the city yet. Do you want I to personally go out of the city to welcome him? Imo Xiaoyao's voice was light but it made people feel an invisible pressure cover the sky. The guard immediately bowed decisively and said, this subordinate accepts the order. He turned and hurriedly left to pass the message for the prince to go out of the city to welcome him. What kind of joke was this? Who is this Lu Jingyun? Feng Zhiyao scratched his head and thought hard. Was the shadow guard that he had led so bad that they did not even know that the emperor had such a trusted general? Imo Xiaoyao said indifferently, Prime Minister Lu is the son of a concubine of the deceased 4th young master. He is ranked 11th in the Lu family. He should be 27 years old this year. Feng Zhiyao frowned, concubine Lu's nephew. Could it be that the emperor had really gone mad from anger because of Imo Jingli? It's not like there's no one else in the court. How could they send someone who has never been on the battlefield to quell the rebellion? Even asking the old Hua Guogua to come out of retirement is better than getting someone who can't do anything. Imo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, the emperor won't use the Hua family. Feng Zhiyao laughed coldly with disdain, so he'll use the Lu family. Of course, he knew that the emperor was guarding against the Hua family. Otherwise, as the eldest daughter of the Hua family, how could the empress only have one princess? The Hua family had already reached the peak of prosperity. In the past, the Hua family had a very good relationship with Mo Lufang. How could the emperor not be on guard? Chapter 229. In the eyes of the emperor, the Lu family is obviously more loyal than the Hua family and easier to control. Imo Xiaoyao calmly pointed out the truth. Feng Zhiyao nodded and said mockingly, isn't that so? If the Lu family is not loyal to the emperor, how could they have been favored by the emperor all these years? Selling their daughters for glory. Based on this point, the Hua family could not compare to the Lu family. The emperor will not let a person who knows nothing control hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Lu Jingyun is just a pawn on the surface. Now that Mo Jingli has rebelled, the emperor will not trust the Yi family anymore. It is inevitable that he will support the Lu family. However, the emperor will probably support some new forces to fight against the Lu family in this short period of time. Mo Xiaoyao said carelessly, as if he was not worried about the war in Yonglin. When the reinforcements arrive, we will leave Yonglin. Since the emperor wants to drag it out, let him drag it out. This war will take 3 to 5 months to finish. Morongshan greets the prince and princess consort. Morongshan quickly walked in and paid his respects. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "General, please sit down and talk. Why have you come here at this time?" Morongshan nodded awkwardly. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "I heard that the prince will leave Yonglin today. I wonder, what does the prince think about the war in Yongzhou?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "General, what do you mean? Once the reinforcements arrive, Shattered Snow Pass will be safe." Morongshan sighed helplessly. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said seriously, "I always speak frankly. Prince, please don't blame me. With the help of the prince, I believe that the rebellion of Prince Li will be quelled within a month." "But why does the prince?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head with a smile. "General, you and I both know that the general is not subject to the emperor's orders when he is away. However, there were very few monarchs who could accept these words since ancient times. I'm sure you know what happened to those generals who didn't take orders from the emperor. These days, King Li's army has not moved. I am worried that King Li will send his army to the east. At that time, the people in the southeast will be involved in the war again." Morongshan said seriously. He was a military general and only had a vague understanding of court affairs. That was why he couldn't understand why there was a better way to solve the problem. Why did they have to drag it out and let the people suffer? Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and sighed, "It's too late. Mo Jingli has already split into 2 groups heading east. In fact, the reason Mo Jingli didn't make any move these days was because Mo Jingli might not be in the army anymore." Morongshan was shocked and asked, "If so, why didn't Prince stop them?" "General." Mo Xiaoyao smiled bitterly. Morongshan immediately regretted his words. In the emperor's eyes, King Ding's residence was more terrifying than King Li's rebel army. How could he allow Prince Ding to interfere with King Li's affairs? He was afraid that once the Mahist army moved, the emperor would immediately punish Prince Ding for disobeying the emperor. At that time, hundreds of thousands of Mahist army. Morongshan couldn't help shivering and didn't dare to think about it. The war in the southeast is inevitable. General only needs to guard Shatter Snow Pass and not let Nanzhao's army enter to join King Li. As for King Li's army in Yongzhou, they will definitely leave Yongzhou in less than a month. Will the Dechu state be divided into north and south? Morongshan asked silently in his heart. Was dealing with Prince Ding, who had protected the country, more important than quelling the rebel King Li? The honest General Morong naturally didn't understand that in the eyes of Emperor Mo Jingqi, Mo Xiaoyao and Mo Jingli were never on the same level. As long as he could deal with Mo Xiaoyao, even if there was another Mo Jingli, there was nothing to worry about. Jiangnan was occupied by Mo Jingli, and he would take it back sooner or later. However, if he allowed Mo Xiaoyao to occupy Jiangnan, not only would he not take it back, he would also have to guard against whether he would extend his hand to Jiangbei or even try to take over the entire Dechu state. Thus, in reality, other than his initial rage, after Mo Jingqi calmed down, he was almost happy with Mo Jingli's sudden rebellion. Only then would he have a perfect reason to kill his younger brother, who was born of the same mother. General Pinko has arrived. A loud voice rang out from outside the courtyard, causing everyone, including Morongshan, to change their expressions. In front of Prince Ding, not to mention a general who had never been on the battlefield and had just been conferred the title of general, even the old Huaduke wouldn't be so rude. Was this newly appointed general too brainless, or did he not care about Prince Ding at all? A flurry of footsteps came from afar. It was clear that there were more than one or two people. Yili tilted her head and heard the footsteps. There were at least 20 to 30 people. She couldn't help but smile. Did this General Pinko come here just to show off his prowess? Feng Zhiyao received Yili's gaze and curled his lips in disdain. Showing off in front of the prince? Was there something wrong with his head? The prince of the northern tribes who had shown off in front of Prince Ding hadn't recovered his senses yet. Just as they reached the entrance, the group was blocked. A sharp voice rang out. Impudent! General Pinko is here. Why aren't you letting us in? The guard at the entrance was not afraid. He said calmly, General, please remove your weapon. Your bodyguards are not allowed in. I am the commander-in-chief of the army. How can I remove my weapon? What does Prince Ding mean by this? A younger voice sounded with a hint of arrogance and displeasure. The guard said in a low voice, bringing weapons in without the permission of the prince will be treated as an assassination attempt. As the commander-in-chief of the army, General Pinko should know this. Please don't make things difficult for me. Hearing the commotion at the entrance, Mo Xiaoyao rubbed his brows impatiently and said, let them in. There was a moment of silence outside the courtyard. Soon, two men walked in. The one in front was dressed in white, with a white battle robe and a silver scabbard sword hanging from his waist. He looked shiny. Yili blinked. She couldn't help but remember that Mo Xiaoyao also seemed to be dressed in white like this a few days ago. She looked at the people walking over and couldn't help but laugh inwardly. Mo Xiaoyao was dressed in white, riding a white horse and holding a silver spear. He did look elegant and imposing, but the person in front of her. Yili strangely thought of a saying. Those who liked to dress in white were all narcissists who were cold on the inside but passionate on the inside. Just as she was thinking with her head lowered, a slightly cold hand grasped her hand. Yili looked up at him. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a smile. There was a hint of doubt in his eyes. Yili shook her head to show that it was nothing. She raised her head to look at the person she had ignored. There was nothing special about the person behind her that left a deep impression. If she had to say something, it was that he was limping when he walked. Yili thought of a certain person who had been called an idiot by Mo Xiaoyao last year. The two people stood in front of the crowd. They didn't seem to have any intention of saluting. Of course, no one here wanted to salute them. Except for Feng Zhiyao, no one here was lower than them. Feng Zhiyao wasn't a general conferred by the imperial court. Naturally, he didn't have any intention of saluting them. The courtyard was silent for a moment. Guanren, who was standing behind Lu Jingyan, seemed to have realized that this couldn't go on. He stood up and said, Prince, General Lu and I are here to take over Yonglin City under the orders of the Emperor. Chapter 230. Mo Xiaoyao did not make things difficult for him. Nodding slightly, he turned to Feng Zhiyao and said, Feng San, order the Black Cloud Cavalry to withdraw from Yonglin. Yes, Prince. Wait. Guan Zhu hurriedly stopped him. Looking somewhat arrogantly at Mo Xiaoyao, he said, Prince may not have heard clearly. General Lu and I are under the Emperor's orders to take over Yonglin, including the soldiers of Yonglin City. In one sentence, not only Yonglin City, but also Yonglin City's 20,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. Everyone present sucked in a breath in their hearts. They looked at Guan Zhu as if they were looking at a dead person. Mo Xiaoyao did not seem to be angry. Smiling faintly, he said, General Guan, did the Emperor send you to provoke I? Guan Zhu's breathing stopped. With a stiff expression, he said, what does Prince mean by this? The Emperor ordered Prince to lead troops to reinforce Yonglin. He did not order the Prince to be the commander-in-chief to quell the rebellion. Now that the commander-in-chief is here, shouldn't the Prince hand over the military power of Yonglin? Of course, he remembered the Emperor's orders before he left to not easily provoke Mo Xiaoyao. But, Thinking of the humiliation Mo Xiaoyao gave him in the past, a trace of hatred flashed through Guanju's eyes. Raising his head, he tried to make himself appear more righteous. Morongshan frowned and said, "General Guan, Prince only ordered the Black Cloud Cavalry to withdraw. You should know that the Black Cloud Cavalry—" Guanju loudly interrupted, "Is the Black Cloud Cavalry not the army of Dechu State? Or does the Dingwa Prince want to maintain his own military power?" At the end of his words, Guanju looked at Mo Xiaoyao with a gaze that could almost be described as malicious. Mo Xiaoyao held on to the armrest and slowly stood up. Guanju was startled and couldn't help but take a step back. Mo Xiaoyao took 2 steady steps forward. Looking at him with a calm expression, he asked softly, "General Guan, did you think that after a few years of recuperation, I's temper would be better than before?" Guanju's face paled. He stared fearfully at the frail-looking man in white. Did Mo Xiaoyao have a good temper? At least 9.5 out of 10 people who knew him now would think that he had a good temper. However, those who had truly known Mo Xiaoyao for a long time knew that this person had never been someone with a good temper. He could beat Mo Jingli up just because he tried to trip him up. He could also join forces with Feng Xiao to beat Mo Jingli up and hang him up on a tree. He could also whip Guan Jia in front of an army of several thousand without saying a word because of his poor command. This kind of temperament could not be considered good. What do you want to do?" Guan Jia asked in fear. "If what you said just now wasn't the emperor's idea." "General Guan, do you know what punishment you will receive?" Mo Xiaoyao asked calmly. Guan Jia looked at Mo Xiaoyao in fear, but he didn't dare to say that it was Mo Jingqi's idea. Even if Mo Jingqi was crazy, he wouldn't ask Mo Xiaoyao for the military power of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Not to mention whether Mo Xiaoyao would give it to him. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to use it. Instead, he would only cause trouble for himself. He could only look pleadingly at Lu Jingyun, who had been ignored. Although Lu Jingyun was unhappy with Prince Sting's disregard, only after seeing Prince Sting did she realize that she didn't have the aura to compete with Prince Sting. Her previous arrogance was only left with unwillingness and fear. Prince. Under Mo Xiaoyao's gaze, Guan Jia's expression began to tremble. Finally, as if all the strength in his body had been sucked out, he knelt down weakly on the ground. Mo Xiaoyao walked past him with steady steps. "Feng San, get ready to leave." "Yes, Prince." Yili smiled and nodded to Morongshan, then followed him. Morongshan helplessly looked at the 2 new generals, sighed and turned to leave. Fortunately, this general had no subordinate relationship with him. In this case, he would take care of his own troops and guard his own pass. Lu Jingyun, who had been left behind, stared blankly at the figures disappearing outside the door. Did anyone remember that he was the new general? The Black Cloud Cavalry was indeed obedient. In less than 15 minutes after Mo Xiaoyao's order, the real Black Cloud Cavalry had all withdrawn from Yonglin City. The strange movements of the Black Cloud Cavalry made the opposing rebel army nervous. When they confirmed that the Black Cloud Cavalry had no intention of attacking them, they sighed in relief. But they did not dare to let down their guard. Yili and Mo Xiaoyao also returned to their rooms to pack and prepare to leave the city to meet with the Black Cloud Cavalry. "Wang Fei, Officer Yun requests an audience," an heir reported from outside the door. Yili raised an eyebrow, curious about Yun Ting's intentions. "Let him in." A moment later, Yun Ting walked in with a nervous expression. Yili had a good impression of this young general and smiled faintly. Yun Ting looked at Yili's light clothing and asked, "Is Wang Fei and the prince leaving soon?" Yili nodded and said, "The prince is handing over to General Lu and will leave soon." "Are Officer Yun and Officer Xia also returning to Shattered Snow Pass?" Yun Ting was slightly embarrassed. After hesitating for a while, he finally gritted his teeth and knelt on one knee, saying, "This general wants to join the Black Cloud Cavalry. Wang Fei, please take me in." Yili looked in shock at Yun Ting's determined expression. She frowned and said, "If Officer Yun wants to join the Black Cloud Cavalry, you should ask the prince." Why are you asking me? Yunting stilled and didn't know what to do. Previously, he had only thought that Wang Fei was here so he could ask Wang Fei, but he had forgotten that Prince Ding was also here. This kind of matter would most likely require Prince Ding's agreement. Seeing Yunting's dazed state, Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Why would Officer Yun want to join the Black Cloud Cavalry?" The Black Cloud Cavalry was chosen from the elites of the Mahist army. It wasn't something that could be joined just because one wanted to. Yunting gritted his teeth and said, "Only the Black Cloud Cavalry is the best army in the Dechu state." Yunting wants to join the Black Cloud Cavalry and follow the prince and Wang Fei on the battlefield. Seeing Yunting's serious appearance, Yi Li burst into laughter. "Officer Yun, you are already the most outstanding officer under General Mu Rong's command. This time, you have made great contributions defending Yonglin. In a few years, you will become the youngest general in the Dechu state. If you join the Black Cloud Cavalry." Yi Li shook her head and said with a smile. Yunting hurriedly said, "As long as I can join the Black Cloud Cavalry, Yunting is willing to be a normal soldier." Yi Li looked at him. "Officer Yun, do you know why the Black Cloud Cavalry only has several tens of thousands of people?" Yunting said matter-of-factly, "The Black Cloud Cavalry is the elite of the elite. Since they are the elite, they are naturally the minority." Yi Li nodded and said, "That's right, the Black Cloud Cavalry is the elite of the elite. But, because they are the elite, they are the minority. In a true battle, the Black Cloud Cavalry will never be the most important troops." Yunting did not understand. They had only heard stories since they were young about how the Black Cloud Cavalry had made great contributions and how they had turned the tides. Why was Wang Fei's explanation different? Yi Li smiled slightly and said, "What is the reason for the two armies to fight? To attack cities and seize land." "That's right, the Black Cloud Cavalry can raid from 1,000 li, they can ambush and kill leaders. They can complete many missions that normal soldiers cannot. But, they cannot attack a city alone, nor can they defend a city alone. Therefore, they are only there to support the army," Yi Li said softly. Chapter 231. Support. A very important support. It is the best trump card for them. They can appear in the most unlikely places. But usually, they can only hide and remain unknown. "Officer Yun, have you ever heard of any famous generals from the Black Cloud Cavalry?" Yunting shook his head. Everyone knew that the Black Cloud Cavalry was powerful, but the generals of the Black Cloud Cavalry were always unknown. The Black Cloud Cavalry were not many, but there were still tens of thousands of them. Even though Prince Ding personally controlled them, it was impossible for Prince Ding to personally arrange everything. Yet, from the day the Black Cloud Cavalry was built, it seemed to only have this name. The Black Cloud Cavalry represented everyone's name. In the history of the Dechu state, there had never been a Black Cloud Cavalry general's real name. Yi Li sighed softly and said, "I see that Officer Yun has a straightforward personality and is a person with great ambitions. And to have such achievements in his early 20s, his future is limitless. If he really becomes a normal member of the Black Cloud Cavalry, I'm afraid it will ruin Officer Yun's ambitions." The Black Cloud Cavalry was the true sword of the Ding Kingdom. The sword did not need to think too much. Where Prince Ding pointed was their will. In reality, it was similar to the special forces in her previous life. With Yunting's personality, even if he really entered, if he did not experience some hardships, he would regret it in the future. As expected, Yunting's face turned red. He said anxiously, "Wang Fei, I." Yi Li raised her hand to stop him. She laughed softly and said, "Don't worry. I'm not saying that you are not good. I just hope that you can think clearly. Is your ambition to be a general who can ride a horse and laugh on the battlefield, or to be a hidden arrow that hides in the shadows and attacks at the right moment?" Yunting was silent. He had never considered what the Wang Fei said. No wonder when he said he wanted to come and beg the Wang Fei, Xia Shu did not support or encourage him as usual. Had he already seen that he was not suited for the Black Cloud Cavalry? But Yunting looked dazedly at the kind and elegant woman in front of him. Worshipping the strong, and Prince Ding and Princess Ding were undoubtedly strong. He knew that he truly wanted to follow them. What's going on? Li Mo Xiaoyao slowly walked in and asked after seeing Yunting's conflicted expression. Li smiled faintly and told him what had just happened. Mo Xiaoyao turned around and looked at Yunting for a while. Yunting felt a little uneasy under his stare, but he still tried his best to remain calm. What did General Murong say? Mo Xiaoyao asked. He had to inform General Murong Shen about the transfer. Yunting's heart jumped and he quickly said, General Murong said that as long as the prince and princess agree, it will be fine. Mo Xiaoyao muttered to himself for a moment, and then said, You are not suitable to join the Black Cloud Cavalry. Yunting immediately felt a wave of disappointment, as well as mixed feelings. Mo Xiaoyao continued, However, if you are willing, you can follow Li for now. Yunting and Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao at the same time. Li raised her eyebrows in confusion. Follow her for what? If she took in a military officer as a bodyguard, Yunting might not be her match. Mo Xiaoyao said, You don't have any useful people by your side. Those four are still far from being able to mobilize troops. I will have Qin Feng follow you, and Yunting as well. Although he is still a bit impetuous, General Murong seems to think that he is a talent that can be nurtured. After a bit of training, if he is useful, we will transfer him into the Mahist army. Li did not care, but Yunting could not hide the shock in his heart. Listening to Prince Ding's words, he was actually training a trusted aide for Princess. In the future, not only would Princess Ding be able to mobilize the Black Cloud Cavalry, she would also be able to control the hundreds of thousands of Mahist army. Many thanks to Prince, this general is willing to follow Princess. Yunting immediately responded. Mo Xiaoyao nodded, Since it is like this, you can go and say goodbye to General Murong. Follow the army and depart in an hour. Yes. Beside the Cloudwater River, compared to Yonglin City where the two armies were still facing each other, Yi Li's group was clearly too relaxed. Once they left Yonglin City, Feng Zhiao took the Black Cloud Cavalry and ran off somewhere. Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao took the accompanying guards and prepared to return to Jing with Shenyang who had just arrived. The pitiful Shenyang did not even have the strength to truss a chicken, but he had rushed from the Chu capital to Yongzhou in less than 10 days. But before he could even catch his breath, he was told that they were about to return to Jing. Shenyang pointed at Mo Xiaoyao, his finger trembling as he panted. He did not forget to say angrily, What did I owe you Mo people in my last life? Ever since he had given the phoenix grass to a certain prince who did not listen to medical advice, Shenyang's temper had become more and more irritable. Shen Xiansheng, the group set up camp beside the Cloudwater River. Mo Xiaoyao took Yunting and the others to go hunting. Yi Li finally had the time to find Shenyang to talk. Shenyang was sitting by the river, holding a medical book that was thick enough to kill someone. He frowned as he read it carefully. Hearing Yi Li's figure, he turned around and wanted to stand up to greet her. Yi Li quickly waved her hand and said, There are no outsiders here, Shen Xiansheng does not have to be like this. Shenyang did not stand on ceremony and sat back down. He placed the medical book aside and smiled, Princess Consort made the Black Cloud Cavalry admire you for your prompt decision to guard Yonglin. I am also full of admiration. Princess Consort is indeed a heroine. Yi Li shook her head and smiled helplessly, Shen Xiansheng does not have to be so courteous. What heroine? I was only forced by the situation. Does Shen Xiansheng know why Yi Li did this? Shenyang looked at Yi Li for a long time and finally sighed, bringing back that harmful phoenix grass, I really do not know if it was right or wrong. Yi Li shook her head and said softly, It was Prince's idea to consume the phoenix grass. Shen Xiansheng has already informed the Prince of the consequences. No matter what, it was Prince's choice. Furthermore, since it has already been done, there is no point in pursuing who was responsible. Yi Li only wants to know how Prince's body is now. Is there any way to solve it? Shenyang looked at Yi Li and his eyes revealed a trace of admiration. He said seriously, in this half a year, I have carefully studied the phoenix grass and also flipped through many ancient medical books. The phoenix grass is not unique to the Eastern Sea. The phoenix grass is called phoenix tail and it grew in the Central Plains in ancient times. According to the ancient books, the phoenix grass is extremely strong and poisonous. However, it is also the nemesis of most poisons in the world. It even has the effect of cleansing the marrow, so it is called a miracle medicine. However, for some reason, the phoenix grass disappeared from the Central Plains, so there is almost no record of it in the medical books. The cold poison in Prince's body is the coldest poison in the world. Although the phoenix tail can counter it, it is not enough to cure the poison. As a result, the fire and cold poisons exist in Prince's body at the same time and it can only be said to have reached a temporary balance. However, this balance is very dangerous and it can even collapse at any time. At that time, even if there is the raging fire lotus, it will be useless. Yi Li nodded. Shen Xianqing once said that the two poisons will change in Prince's body. Shenyang said, really? If the cold poison and the phoenix tail can cancel each other out, there are other ways to think of. However, the two poisons in Prince's body are acting independently. The cold gets colder and the fire gets hotter. If a normal person were to eat the raging fire lotus seed by mistake, their internal organs would be burned to ashes in an instant. If the raging fire lotus seed were to combine with the phoenix tail, I'm afraid, before the cold poison could be cured, Prince would die of the fire poison first. Chapter 232. Yi Li frowned. Mr. Shen, is the Bai Luo grass useful to the prince? Shenyang was startled and began to ponder. After a long time, he said, Bai Luo grass and phoenix grass are both long-lost medicines. Legend has it that it can bring the dead back to life and prolong one's life to 100 years old. But whether or not it can cure the poison in the prince's body, I'm not sure. After all, the Bai Luo grass has been extinct for a longer time than the phoenix grass. I've only heard about it from my ancestors. Yi Li nodded and said, I understand, but it's always good to have more hope. Shenyang asked curiously, could it be that the princess consort knows where the Bai Luo grass is? Yi Li nodded slightly, I'll find it as soon as possible. This matter. Mr. Shen, please don't mention it to the prince first. If she wanted to take the Bai Luo grass from the sickly scholar, she definitely couldn't use the people of the mansion. With the hatred that sickly scholar had for Mo Xiaoyao, he would rather not destroy the Bai Luo grass than let the people of the Prince Ding mansion get it. How long can the prince's body last? Shenyang lowered his eyebrows and said in a low voice, as long as there are no accidents, there shouldn't be any problems within a year and a half. Furthermore, the effect of the phoenix grass is not continuous. The prince's body is indeed much better than before. But when the moon is full, the cold and fire will come together and it will be so painful that he will wish he was dead. During summer and autumn, the fire poison will burn the body and during spring and winter, the cold poison will attack the heart. Whether it is the cold poison or the fire poison, it will be 10 times more painful than when the cold poison acts up. Yi Li remembered the scene she saw when she stepped into the room that day. She couldn't imagine how painful it would be for someone like Mo Xiaoyao to be in such a sorry state. Painkillers. Shenyang shook his head sadly, painkillers are completely ineffective. Not only that. I'm afraid that in the future, any painkillers or even knockout drugs will be ineffective on the prince. Yi Li felt a chill in her heart. This meant that even if Mo Xiaoyao was injured in the future, he would not be able to use painkillers or anesthetics. Mr. Li. Yi Li turned around and saw the white-robed man walking towards her with a smile. She lowered her eyes to hide the worry in her eyes as she walked up to him. Mo Xiaoyao looked at Shenyang, who had already picked up the medical book and was preparing to continue reading. He lowered his head and smiled at Yi Li. What is Mr. Li talking about with Mr. Shen? Yi Li smiled and said, I'm asking Mr. Shen about some herbal medicine. Didn't you see several strange herbs in Nanzhao this time? Ask Mr. Shen what they are used for. Mo Xiaoyao smiled slightly. Li has a wide range of interests. She's even interested in medicine. Yi shook her head. I don't have much talent in medicine, but I do have some knowledge of herbal medicine. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi towards the camp. As he walked, he smiled and said, I know. I heard that you have your people memorize herbal medicine books and follow the doctors to identify herbs. Yi smiled and said, it's just some common herbs. You can't always carry them around with you, right? Mr. Li is right. Maybe we can have the Black Cloud Cavalry follow them and learn. Mo Xiaoyao thought. Yi smiled faintly and said, the Black Cloud Cavalry is not the same as them. They only need a certain number of doctors to follow them, or they themselves are doctors. Mo Xiaoyao looked down at Yi and said, does Mr. Li have some special idea that you don't want to tell me? Yi shook her head. No, it's just a prototype. When I finish it, maybe I can give you a surprise. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, then I will wait for Mr. Li's surprise. Let's go eat. Then we will go watch a play. The play that Mo Xiaoyao spoke of was a good play. There were more than 30,000 soldiers hidden in Yongzhou and Yongzhou. Yi finally knew why Feng Zhiyao had taken the 20,000 Black Cloud Cavalry. In one night, many mountain strongholds in Yongzhou and Yongzhou were destroyed. Countless people who had disguised themselves as bandits but were clearly well trained were killed by the Black Cloud Cavalry. The rest fled in panic towards the border between Yongzhou and Xiling. Mo Xiaoyao led Yi and the others to wait at the border. When the group of happy remnant soldiers saw the dense armored cavalry, their eyes couldn't help but reveal looks of despair. The Yongzhou officials all knelt on the ground with ashen faces, trembling as they looked at the beautiful couple sitting side by side in front of them. The man was gentle and elegant, the woman elegant and graceful. However, in their eyes, they were even more terrifying than man-eating demons. 2 days ago, they were invited to Prince Sting's side by a token. Prince Sting didn't say anything, only bringing them along. Wherever Prince Sting went, they would follow. They watched helplessly as the mountain strongholds were destroyed by the Black Cloud Cavalry one after another. The 20,000 people in front of the Black Cloud Cavalry were like ants, not worth a mention. These remnant soldiers in front of them were already the last fish that escaped the net. However, they were still stopped by Prince Sting on this small hill less than 5 li from the border. Mo Xiaoyao calmly looked at the Yongzhou governor who was kneeling closest to him, calmly asking, Sir, do you know why the Yongzhou governor died? The Yongzhou governor's face paled, saying with a trembling voice, Rebellion, rebellion. The Yongzhou governor was still killed by the Ding King's shadow guard even under the protection of King Li's powerful army. This matter had already spread throughout the world before today. It also made many officials tense up in their minds. Mo Xiaoyao said with a faint smile, Rebellion? Correct, this is indeed a capital offense. Then, does Sir know what kind of offense it is to betray the country? This. Prince, this small official doesn't dare. This small official is loyal and devoted to the Dechu state. Loyal and devoted. Mo Xiaoyao said with a cold laugh, loyal and devoted? Where did these 10,000 people in your Yongzhou come from? Why did General Wu Qingliang and the 20,000 soldiers in Yongzhou die? This small official truly does not know. The Yongzhou governor cried out. This small official is innocent. I beg Prince to judge clearly, Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, I don't care if you are innocent or not. You can tell the emperor yourself. I invited you here today to let you see the Black Cloud Cavalry pay tribute to the Yongzhou governor and General Wu's spirit. Even though the civil officials and military generals do not have subordinates, they can still be considered colleagues. Everyone here should also send them on their way. Feng Zhiyao, who was standing behind Mo Xiaoyao, waved his hand. Kill! 10,000 arrows were released. The remnant Western Tomb soldiers who were trapped in the center immediately fell to the ground and died. The officials kneeling on the ground smelled the pungent smell of blood in the air. One by one, they fought to be the first to vomit. Mo Xiaoyao acted as if he did not see it. He pulled Yi up and turned his head to order, Send the officials back to their respective manors. Also, throw these Western Tomb people out of the border. Do not pollute my Dechu state's land. As you command. Mo Xiaoyao nodded his head in satisfaction. He turned his head and smiled at Yi Li. Yi Li, we should return to the capital. Yi Li nodded her head slightly and followed Mo Xiaoyao. What about not killing captives? There seemed to be no need to say. Even though he had received the emperor's urgent order to return to the capital, Mo Xiaoyao clearly did not take it to heart. Instead, he had Feng Zhiyao leave with the Black Cloud Cavalry. He himself took Yi Li and the others and leisurely headed north. They spent close to 10 days to reach Guangling City. Because she did not have a purpose in coming to Guangling City for the second time, Yi Li appeared much more relaxed. Only when Mo Xiaoyao brought her to stand in front of the Wind and Moon Pavilion did she look back at the man beside her with some surprise. Chapter 233. Mo Xiaoyao smiled but didn't say a word. The Wind and Moon Inn wasn't open for business during the day. However, there was still someone at the door to welcome them. Looking at the young man standing at the door with a serious expression, Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, the Tianyi Pavilion is indeed well informed. It seems that Han Mingyue hasn't wasted her time all these years. The young man's smile was a bit stiff. Thank you for your praise, Prince. My superior ordered me to welcome the Prince and Princess consort here. Please come in. After entering the Wind and Moon Inn, the young man led them directly to the backyard. It was still the same pavilion where Yi Li saw Han Mingxi last time. Han Mingxi and Han Mingyue sat facing each other. Seeing Yi Li, Han Mingxi's eyes flashed with a trace of absent-mindedness. When he came back to his senses, he raised his eyebrows and smiled at her. Han Mingyue put down his teacup and stood up to welcome them. His smile was gentle and elegant. Xiaoyao, long time no see. You're really good. Without waiting for him to finish speaking, Mo Xiaoyao directly waved his palm. The fierce wind from his palm attacked the elegant man with earth-shattering force. Han Mingyue's voice suddenly stopped. He awkwardly flipped over and dodged Mo Xiaoyao's palm. However, the fierce wind from the palm still made him unable to breathe. He coughed a few times before smiling bitterly. Xiaoyao, long time no see. Is this how you treat me? Mo Xiaoyao snorted softly. He stepped forward and continuously attacked. Every palm strike was real, and there was absolutely no intention of joking about it. Han Mingyue could only withdraw his smile and carefully deal with it. The two of them fought back and forth in the garden. While the fight was in full swing, Han Mingxi also stood up and walked to Yi Li's side. He raised his eyebrows and smiled. Junwei, long time no see. Are you here to see me? If you want to look at me, just do it yourself. Why did you bring him along? Yi Li pointed at the man in white in the garden, indicating that he wanted to come. Han Mingxi glanced sideways, and the smile on his face was a little forced. Junwei, Yi Li said calmly, don't worry, Prince won't kill him. If he really wanted Han Mingyue's life, Mo Xiaoyao wouldn't have to do it himself. No matter how powerful the Tianyi Pavilion was, could they stop the Black Cloud Cavalry or the Shadow Guard of the Ding King's mansion? Han Mingxi smiled bitterly. But Prince Ding has no intention of showing mercy. Mo Xiaoyao was only in his 20s, but in Feng Zhiyao's eyes, there wasn't a single expert who could be compared to him. One could only imagine the distance between him and Han Mingyue. While the two of them were talking, Han Mingyue had already been slapped to the ground. He fell not far from the two of them and spat out a mouthful of blood. Yi Li could tell with a glance that two of his ribs were broken. Han Mingxi hurriedly went forward to help him up, but Han Mingyue waved his hand to stop him. He looked up at Mo Xiaoyao who was strolling over and asked, Xiaoyao, have you calmed down? Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly. Do you know why I didn't kill you this time? Han Mingyue raised his eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, since Li promised Han Mingxi to let you go, I will let you go this time. However, you better remember that I have a limit to my patience. If you make a move against Li again, You might as well try and see how far I can go. Han Mingyue clutched his chest and coughed violently. He looked at Imo Xiaoyao helplessly and said, Xiaoyao, in your eyes, is Yili more important than our friendship since childhood? Imo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and his lips curled into a mocking smile. In your eyes, when have you ever thought that our friendship since childhood was important? Han Mingyue was speechless. That's right, he had betrayed their friendship first. However, in my eyes, you will always be my best friend. Han Mingyue said in a low voice. Imo Xiaoyao snorted and said calmly, since you called me your friend. I promise you, the next time you offend I won't kill you. Han Mingyue was stunned, but her expression changed when she saw Han Mingxi and Yi Li's curiosity and confusion. Xiaoyao. Don't. This has nothing to do with her. This was all my idea. Hearing his words, Han Mingxi's face immediately darkened. She snorted unhappily and swallowed back the words she was about to say. In any case, Prince Ding didn't plan on killing him. Just torment him until he didn't have the energy to run around. Imo Xiaoyao wasn't interested in whose idea it was. He turned to Han Mingxi and said, if you want him to live well, then keep a close eye on him. Han Mingxi's handsome face was ugly as he coldly said, Prince doesn't need to worry. Imo Xiaoyao held Yi Li's hand and prepared to leave. Han Mingyue on the ground opened her mouth and said, Xiaoyao, you specially took a detour to Guangling. It can't be that you want to beat me up, right? Imo Xiaoyao stopped in his tracks and turned to look at her, saying, by the way, I'll tell you something. If you don't know how to play politics, then earn your money. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and cry about it later. Seeing the two leave without looking back, Han Mingyue couldn't help but frown as she thought about Imo Xiaoyao's words. Don't know how to play politics. He really didn't have any interest in politics and had never gotten involved before. Only. Her expression changed. Han Mingyue turned to Han Mingxi and said, quick. Send someone to investigate what happened in Xiling. Han Mingxi only felt the veins on his forehead throbbing. Who said that young Master Yu was smarter than others? He was already dumber than a donkey, okay? Others wouldn't turn back unless they hit a wall, but he still wouldn't turn back even if his head was broken and bleeding. Investigate my ass. This young master is a citizen of Dechu State. Why should I care about the life and death of Xiling? Someone, bring me the best tendon softening powder. If anyone dares to give him the antidote, this young master will skin them. I've seen what it means to be a femme fatale. I don't believe that other than that slut, there aren't any other women in this world. This prince will go and disfigure her tomorrow. When no one wants her anymore, this prince will buy her back to be your servant girl. After he finished speaking, Han Mingxi couldn't be bothered to care about his older brother who was still stuck on the ground and couldn't move. He flicked his sleeves and left in a huff. Han Mingxi, stop right there. Han Mingyue said sternly. Han Mingxi's rushing body paused. He turned around and gnashed his teeth as he waited for his older brother who was 70% similar to him. In his heart, he wanted nothing more than to pull out that femme fatale's tendons and skin him alive. He had worshipped his older brother since he was young, but he didn't dare to compliment his older brother's taste in women. Seeing Han Mingxi's cold and angry glare, Han Mingyue's eyes flashed with a trace of guilt. Her voice softened as she said, Mingxi, don't make a fuss. Big brother promises that he won't do anything else. Imo Xiaoyao broke 2 of my ribs. Come and help me up. Han Mingxi was stunned. Seeing Han Mingyue's deathly pale face, his heart softened and he went forward to help his older brother up. You! Han Mingyue! After a moment, Han Mingxi's voice was filled with anger and resentment. Unfortunately, his entire body was frozen and he couldn't move. His handsome face was twisted as he stared at the man in front of him who was clutching his chest with a deathly pale face. Han Mingyue's eyes were filled with guilt as she looked at her younger brother. I'm sorry, Mingxi. Seeing that he was about to turn around and leave, Han Mingxi cried out in despair, Han Mingyue, you idiot, I've been poisoned. You really want Yi Li to kill me? Han Mingyue turned to look at him with a smile and shook her head. You really are a foolish child. Mingxi, since you boast that you're better at judging people than I am, how can you not see that Yili won't kill you? She didn't poison you either. Han Mingxi said coldly, so these past few days, you've been trying to determine if there's any poison in my body. Now that you've confirmed it, you want to leave. Chapter 234. Don't worry, I won't make a move on your friend again. Mo Xiaoyao. I can't afford to offend him. Han Mingyue looked at her brother gently. After thinking for a while, she warned, Mingxi, stay away from Yili. She's not someone you can afford to offend. Han Mingxi's face stiffened. He said disdainfully, are you qualified to say that? Han Mingyue shook her head helplessly. Do you think you're smarter than me? Mingxi, I can fight with anyone in the world, but I've never thought of fighting with Xiaoyao. Do you know? Han Mingxi sneered. Yes, you can choose your opponent, but unfortunately, you don't know how to choose a woman. Besides using you, has that woman ever looked you in the eye? Even if Junwei doesn't like me, she would at least save me. She would feel guilty for me and show mercy to you because of me. What have you gained all these years? The smile on Han Mingyue's face gradually turned bitter and helpless. In the end, she had no choice but to admit that her brother was right. She could only turn and leave silently. After a long time, the young man who led the way appeared in the garden. Second young master, the young master has left. Han Mingxi, who had just had his acupoints unsealed, was extremely irritated. So what if he's gone? When has he ever treated us as equals? The young man lowered his head and said, the young master said he won't return. The Wind and Moon Pavilion and all the banknotes in the bank have been left to the second young master. The Tianyi Pavilion will no longer listen to the second young master's orders. He's already made his plans. If it wasn't for Prince Ding's visit today, was he intending to leave without a sound? Han Mingyue, you're ruthless. Han Mingxi clenched his teeth. The young man lowered his head and didn't say anything. Han Mingxi snorted coldly. Slut, just you wait. In the best inn in Guangling, Yi Li and her group had booked the best courtyard in the inn for the time being. Xiao Yao, today you. Looking at the man beside her who had his head lowered as he read, Yi Li frowned slightly and asked with some hesitation. Mo Xiaoyao put down his book and smiled. Li Li wants to ask why I went to look for Han Mingyue. Yi Li nodded. If it was just to beat him up to vent her anger, it would be too troublesome. Mo Xiaoyao said indifferently, if I'm not wrong, Han Mingyue will be heading to West Hill very soon. To the West Hill? Mo Xiaoyao nodded. That's right. Rather than letting him leave quietly, I might as well send him on his way. Although the Han family wasn't ranked at the top in Dechu State, they were at least in the top 10. If he brought them all to West Hill, it wouldn't be a good thing. Yi Li's eyes flashed. You're saying that Han Mingyue wants to. She didn't say the word treason, but Mo Xiaoyao nodded indifferently. I understand Han Mingyue. The country and the world are nothing in his eyes. To him, there's no difference if you become a citizen of Dechu State to a citizen of West Hill or a citizen of the northern tribes. If that's the case, why not eliminate him completely? Yi Li didn't understand. Even if Mo Xiaoyao really valued his friendship with Han Mingyue, he definitely wouldn't see him as more important than the Dechu State. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly. The Tianyi Pavilion is spread throughout the 4 countries. Once Han Mingyue is killed, there'll be a lot of trouble. If he wants to leave, then let him leave. I've said before that he's not suited for politics. Since he's openly committed treason, then there's no need for us to leave the Dechu State. In that case, there is no need for the Tianyi Pavilion to exist within the borders of Great Chu. The most important reason why he came to Guangling was to wipe out the Tianyi Pavilion. The southern part of Dechu State, especially Guangling City, was the Tianyi Pavilion's headquarters. How could it be so easy for Han Mingyue to withdraw his people and carriages from under his nose? Han Mingxi. Yi Li asked with a frown. Mo Xiaoyao said, if we use another method, Han Mingxi might leave with Han Mingyue. But today, he won't be able to leave. If Han Mingxi is really smart, he'll come to me. Yi Li looked at him. You're deliberately provoking Han Mingyue so that he'll act in advance and drive a wedge between the two brothers? Mo Xiaoyao didn't deny it. He rubbed between his eyebrows tiredly and said, it's a good thing that Han Mingxi stays. If they both leave, the entire Han family can only be executed. Han Mingyue and his brother weren't the only members of the Han family. No matter which big family, main family, branch family, or main family, they couldn't take everyone away. Once all of them were connected, the scope of the implications was shocking to the eye. Han Mingyue will side with the West Hill Imperial Court. He's not an ordinary person. The Han family is a big family, and the Tianyi Pavilion is even more involved. As long as he goes to West Hill, whether it's the Emperor of Xiling or the Genom of Gojoseon, they'll definitely try to rope him in. Whether he'll be used by them or not, in the eyes of the imperial family, he's already a traitor. The imperial family couldn't tolerate sand in their eyes. As long as Han Mingyue went to West Hill, it would be a betrayal. Even if he didn't betray the country, the imperial family would rather kill the wrong person than let him go. Yi Li sighed speechlessly. She still couldn't understand Han Mingyue. Han Mingyue, is he doing this for a woman? Mo Xiaoyao was stunned. He raised his head and looked at Yi Li for a long time. Finally, he nodded and said, yes, it's indeed for a woman. Yi Li frowned. She felt that this woman's identity was special. She hesitated whether or not she should continue this topic. Mo Xiaoyao looked at her quietly. His smile was calm and warm. Yi Li, you can ask anything you want to know. This woman, is someone you know? Mo Xiaoyao nodded. Just as he was about to speak, Sen reported from outside, Princess Consort. Young Master Han requests an audience. Mo Xiaoyao raised an eyebrow slightly. He looked apologetically at Yi Li and said, let him in. When Han Mingxi came in, he looked like a completely different person from his usual playful and flamboyant appearance. His originally handsome and slightly evil smile had disappeared. Right now, he looked more tired and gloomy, and seemed to have some grievance and disappointment from being abandoned. Yi Li could only sigh silently inside. Mo Xiaoyao had made the decision he thought was most appropriate. Han Mingyue had chosen the person he thought was most important. As for Han Mingxi, from the beginning to the end, he was the most innocent one. Princess Consort. Han Mingxi's voice was slightly stiff. Mo Xiaoyao nodded slightly and said calmly, young Master Han, please sit. Han Mingxi sat down without a word. His gaze passed lightly over Yi Li's body and paused for a moment before returning to Mo Xiaoyao. Prince already knew of my big brother's plans? Staring at Mo Xiaoyao, Han Mingxi asked rudely. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, Han Mingyue understands me, and I understand him. So, I can roughly guess what kind of decision he will make for someone or something. But he probably did not expect me to come so quickly. Han Mingxi was silent. Yes, if Mo Xiaoyao had not suddenly come to Guangling, perhaps Han Mingyue would have suddenly disappeared after arranging everything at night or during the day. But now, Han Mingyue, whose plans had been disrupted, could only sneak attack Han Mingxi and then leave in a hurry. But he left behind a huge mess for his little brother who had been spoiled since childhood. Then, young Master Han, what plans do you have in coming to CI? Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Chapter 235. Han Mingxi stared at him and asked, if I don't have any plans, what does Prince plan to do? Mo Xiaoyao lowered his eyes and said, the Tianyi Pavilion spies in Guangling and in Dechu State will all be eradicated in 3 days. As for the Han family, I do not have the authority to punish them. However, if the decree from the capital really comes, Sir Han should know what the contents will be. 9. Familial extermination. Han Mingxi murmured bitterly. Big brother, for that woman, do you think you don't care about me or the Han family at all? The hall was silent for a moment. Han Mingxi finally raised his head and said to Mo Xiaoyao, "The Han family has already expelled Han Mingyue from the family. From now on, Han Mingyue is no longer a member of the Han family in Guangling." Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly. Who said that Han Mingxi was useless? Based on his decisiveness, Han Mingxi was definitely more suitable than Han Mingyue to be in charge of the Han family. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. "Since that is the case, I will also write to the emperor to declare the Han family's innocence." Han Mingyue lowered her eyes and said faintly, "Many thanks to Prince." Although he did not have a good impression of Mo Xiaoyao, Han Mingxi could not help but thank him. Even if the Han family and Han Mingyue broke off their relationship, once Han Mingyue really worked for Xiling in the future, the Han family would still not be able to escape the fate of being punished. Even if they were lucky enough to escape, the expenses needed to clear up the relationship would be enough to destroy the Han family. With Prince Ding's words, even the emperor would not question the Han family's innocence. The Ding kingdom and the 3 surrounding countries could be said to have a deep hatred. Even if the emperor himself colluded with the enemy, Prince Ding would not collude with the enemy. "I have one more thing to ask of Prince and Princess Consort." "Sir, please speak," Mo Xiaoyao said. A trace of determination flashed through Han Mingxi's eyes. He looked at Yi Li and said, "As the head of the Han family, Han Mingxi is willing to follow Prince and Princess Consort." Following as the head of the Han family meant that the entire Han family would support the Ding kingdom. "What are the conditions?" Mo Xiaoyao asked. Han Mingxi had made such a huge bet, of course, not without conditions. Han Mingxi said in a deep voice, "I only ask, if Big Brother lands in the hands of Wang Yi in the future, I ask Wang Yi to be magnanimous and spare his life." Han Mingxi was very clear that with Han Mingyue's future identity and position, it was impossible for her to not go against the Ding King's residence. At the same time, he was also clear that his eldest brother was far from being Prince Ding's opponent. Not only because his martial arts and wisdom were slightly inferior to Prince Ding's, but also because he did not have Princess Ding's assistance. That slut would only cause trouble for his eldest brother. Mo Xiaoyao chuckled in a low voice. "Young Master Han is indeed loyal. Since young Master Han has so much confidence in this king, as you wish. If Sir Han has any matters in the future, just follow Princess Li's wishes and do it." Han Mingxi looked at Mo Xiaoyao with surprise and then looked at Yi Li who was sitting beside him. He bowed his head and said, "This subordinate obeys. I have disturbed Prince and Princess Consort. Farewell." Seeing Han Mingxi stand up and leave, Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and suddenly said, "Han Mingyue dared to let go so easily because he knows I's way of doing things. He knows that I will not harm the foundation of the Han family." Han Mingxi's feet paused for a moment and then he walked out of the hall without looking back. "Why did you tell him this? And let him listen to me?" Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked in confusion. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "Han Mingyue is loyal, Han Mingxi is also loyal. But Han Mingyue is more loyal, while Han Mingxi is more loyal to his brothers. My tone will let him know that I is scheming against his Han family's power one day, so I might as well tell him directly now. He is a smart person and knows what to choose. As for Princess Li, since she is already involved in this dispute, no one can withdraw. Princess Li, you need to have enough strength to protect yourself. Even if you don't have me, no one will dare to touch your strength. Also, Han Mingxi is arrogant and a bit of a schemer. If he refuses to obey me, even if he is loyal to me, he will have to obey me in public but oppose me in private. I don't think he will harm you. But Princess Li." As if thinking of something, Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li with a serious expression. Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao's voice was gentle and elegant. "You can't be too good to him. Otherwise?" Yi Li felt a bit uncomfortable under his strange gaze and asked. "Otherwise, I will kill him." Mo Xiaoyao said in a low voice, but Yi Li could hear the seriousness in his words. "At least not while I am alive." Yi Li's heart trembled. She reached out to hold his hand and said seriously, "You will be fine. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and stopped talking about this topic. Alright, Princess Li. Let's continue talking about what we were talking about. Yi Li's memory was not bad. She raised her eyebrows and looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, what kind of woman can make someone like Han Mingyue so obsessed? Not to mention how many women Han Mingyue had seen. As the owner of the Wind and Moon Inn, which of the women in the Wind and Moon Inn wasn't multi-talented and beautiful? What kind of peerless beauty could make a man like Han Mingyue so infatuated? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li and said in a deep voice, Su Zuidi. Su Zuidi. Su Zuidi. Yi Li was a bit shocked. Su Zuidi is not dead. Mo Xiaoyao nodded faintly, as if he did not care that his ex-fiancée was not dead. He also did not care that his former good friend Han Mingyue was obsessed with his ex-fiancée. In just a moment, Yi Li's mind was filled with countless thoughts and thoughts. After a while, she asked, the person who wanted Han Mingyue to kidnap me last year was Su Zuidi? She is now in West Hill, and she has something to do with the Emperor of Shiling's wife? Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li apologetically and nodded. Yi Li could not help but rub her eyebrows as she analyzed the information she knew in her mind. Su Zuidi died 3 months after Mo Xiaoyao was seriously injured. But now she was in West Hill, and she was very likely to be the wife of the Emperor of Shiling. Han Mingyue and Mo Xiaoyao were good friends, but he was also in love with Su Zuidi. After Su Zuidi died, Han Mingyue and Mo Xiaoyao broke off, but it was obvious that Han Mingyue had betrayed Mo Xiaoyao. In other words, Han Mingyue and Su Zuidi had done something to betray Mo Xiaoyao. But there shouldn't be any secret relationship between the two. Judging from Han Mingxi's attitude towards Su Zuidi should be using Han Mingyue. Miss Su's death was due to Han Mingyue's help. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled faintly. Li Li is indeed quick-witted. Yi Li smiled faintly. It's not hard to guess. To be able to hide the fact that Miss Su is still alive from so many people, one must have great power. But although Elder Su is highly respected, the Su family does not have much power in the capital. If you didn't help Miss Su fake her death, then only the Tianyi Pavilion's master, who was very close to Miss Su and admired her, could do it. You wouldn't do such a boring thing, right? Judging from his attitude towards Su Zuidi, he didn't seem like someone who would easily let his fiancée fake her death to escape the marriage. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was not very good, but there was no anger or resentment. He simply didn't want to talk about it. Yi Li tilted her head and thought. Actually, compared to why Miss Su faked her death, I'm more curious about why she went to West Hill after faking her death. If she simply didn't want to marry a seriously injured and disabled person like Mo Xiaoyao, she could have found a Mr. Right in the true state with her beauty after faking her death, or she could have simply been together with Han Mingyue. Leaving some aspects aside, Han Mingyue was definitely one of the best Mr. Right in the eyes of women. Judging from Mo Xiaoyao's attitude towards Su Zuidi and Han Mingyue all these years, even if the two of them were really together, Mo Xiaoyao probably wouldn't retaliate. A lady from a noble family who had lived in the capital since she was young, but after faking her death, she ran thousands of miles to West Hill State. Chapter 236. Is it convenient to talk about Miss Su's current identity? Yi Li asked curiously. Noble Consort Qingrong of the Shiling Kingdom, by long Noble Consort Qingrong? Yi Li raised her eyebrows. Even if she had no general knowledge, she still remembered that the title of Noble Consort seemed to have only one word. So Su Zuidi's status in the Shiling Kingdom was not low. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li decided not to ask. She only needed to know that between her and Su Zuidi, Mo Xiaoyao was definitely on her side. As for the noble consort Qingrong of Shiling, who obviously had feelings for Mo Xiaoyao, or was somewhat unwilling to give up, it was better for her to think about it herself. It was obviously not a good topic to discuss with her husband about his ex-fiancée. Yi Li decided not to talk about it, but Mo Xiaoyao did not think so. He said calmly, the Bai family is one of the 4 major surnames in the Shiling Kingdom. Most of the empresses and noble consorts of the Shilin kingdom were from the Bai family. This included the current emperor of Shiling's empress. Bai Long entered the palace 7 years ago. At that time, she was named Consort Rong and was favored by the emperor of Shiling. After the empress passed away, she was named noble consort Qingrong. If the emperor of Shiling had not personally asked the emperor of Shiling to name noble consort Hui, who was also from the Bai family, as his empress, she would have been the emperor of Shiling's empress by now. Yi Li was silent. In less than 10 years, she went from being the second son of the Prince Ding mansion of Dechu state to almost being the empress of the emperor of Shiling. It had to be said that Miss Su's life was very legendary. Looking at Imo Xiaoyao's expression, Yi Li hesitated and asked, "Did you know later that she was not dead, or did you know all along?" Imo Xiaoyao's lips sank slightly and said, "At that time, I had not recovered from my injury. When I knew, Han Mingyue was about to take her out of the capital." "You didn't do anything?" Yi Li was curious. With Imo Xiaoyao's original personality, even if he didn't immediately kill Han Mingyue and Su Zuodi, he wouldn't let them leave the capital unharmed. Or if Imo Xiaoyao really loved Su Zuodi, he wouldn't have let her leave the capital. Imo Xiaoyao glanced at her. "I was in a bad mood at the time, so I did intend to kill them. However, Elder Su rushed over and personally knelt on the ground to beg me. Elder Su is my first teacher. Su Zuodi's father saved my elder brother's life. Her elder brother also died in that battle to save me. After I calmed down, I let them go." Yi Li nodded silently. If anyone told her that Imo Xiaoyao loved Su Zuodi to the bone again, she would throw them into the water to wash their eyes. The man's voice was as calm as a stranger's. However, even a beauty like Su Zuodi couldn't move Imo Xiaoyao's heart. Have you ever liked Su Zuodi?" Imo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li in surprise. He nodded with a faint smile and said, "Of course I have." Yi Li slightly knit her brows and ignored the uneasiness in her heart. "Then why now?" Imo Xiaoyao interrupted her and said, "She is my fiancée. We grew up together and she might even be my wife in the future. Moreover, she is very beautiful, talented and has a good temperament. Why don't I like her? However, she always seems to think that I am not good enough for her. After I was injured, she wanted to fake her death and leave. Because of her father and brother, I let her go. Then we don't have any relationship anymore, right?" Yi Li nodded. To sum up Imo Xiaoyao's words, Imo Xiaoyao had once felt that Su Zuodi was a perfect fiancé. The men in the Ding King's residence had always been faithful, and it wasn't just a matter of love. As long as they recognized their wife, they would treat her well. So this was the so-called truth of mutual love that was spread in the capital. Since Su Zuodi chose to leave in the end, she naturally had nothing to do with Imo Xiaoyao. So in the eyes of Imo Xiaoyao now, Su Zuodi was just a stranger. She could even be an enemy now. Guangling City itself did not have many things to deal with. But Han Mingxi's actions were very swift. On the same day, the news of Han Mingyue being expelled from the Han family and that the Han family had changed hands with the second young master came out of Guangling City. Even the people of Guangling City did not know much about Han Mingxi. They only knew that the Han family had this second young master and nothing else. Now that the Han family had changed hands, all the wealthy merchants and officials in Guangling City naturally had to pay attention. In this somewhat unexpected hubbub, Imo Xiaoyao and Yi Li quietly left Guangling City and headed towards the Chu capital. Just as they returned to the capital, Imo Xiaoyao was summoned by the emperor to the palace to discuss matters. Yi Li did not care about how Imo Xiaoyao would explain her disappearance and appearance in Yonglin City. She was already entangled by the people in the palace who were concerned about her. With great difficulty, she managed to appease the wet nurse and Mother Lin. After listening to Steward Imo and Mother Sun report on the recent affairs of the Ding Palace, Yi Li was thinking of going to see Qing Wan and Qing Yu who were still recuperating when a servant came to report that Lord Yi and old Madam Yi were asking for an audience. Compared to last year's flush of success, this year's Minister Yi could be said to be covered in dark clouds. At the beginning of the year, Princess Ding's third daughter went missing in the palace. The Zhaoyi's second daughter and little grandson were burned to death. Not even 2 months had passed and the Yi family had not recovered yet. The fourth son-in-law suddenly rebelled. Although the emperor had not yet vented his anger on the Yi family, Minister Ye's days were not so good. Occasionally, Minister Yi could not help but wonder if the heavens did this to him because they did not like him. Therefore, after hearing the news that Prince Ding and Princess Ding had both returned to the capital, Minister Yi did not care about putting on the airs of a father and waited for Yi Li to come home to pay his respects. He directly brought old Madame Yi to the door. Yi Li stepped into the reception pavilion and saw Minister Yi and old Madame Ye's obviously old and haggard appearance. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. "Father, grandmother. Li, you finally came back safe and sound." Grandmother was worried to death. Old Madame Yi pulled Yi Li to tears. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "I made grandmother worry. It's Li's fault." Minister Yi looked at this daughter strangely. He always felt that something was not right. Although he was not very willing to get along with this daughter since his wife passed away, this did not prevent him from knowing Yi Li's situation. This third daughter was quiet and did not like to talk since childhood. But like his wife, she seemed to be born with the grace and elegance of a noble family. But this time when he saw her, Minister Yi keenly found that there seemed to be something between her eyebrows. Even if she was just sitting quietly and letting old Madame Yi hold her hand with a quiet smile, Minister Yi clearly felt a sense of sharpness and pressure that he had never felt before. He could not help but think of the rumors he heard before about Princess Ding suddenly appearing in Yongzhou and helping General Murong to guard Yonglin. Although not many people knew this news, Minister Yi was the emperor, Prince Li, and Prince Ding's father-in-law. Naturally, he had some unknown channels of information. The credibility of the information he received was definitely much more real than the rumors outside. Looking at the gentle woman with a smile in front of him, Minister Ye's heart was filled with mixed feelings. He had a daughter who hid it well. This daughter even hid it from him, her father, and he used her as an abandoned pawn. Chapter 237. How have father and grandmother been recently? After the servants served tea and left, Yi Li asked softly. Minister Yi froze for a moment and looked at Yi Li's expression before replying, "They're fine, but your fourth sister, she..." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. "Prince Li didn't take fourth sister with him when he left the capital?" Minister Yi shook his head. Fortunately, Mo Jingli didn't take Yiying away. Otherwise, the Yi family and Prince Li wouldn't be able to escape the crime of conspiring to rebel. Although Yiying was now under house arrest, the emperor finally believed that the Yi family didn't wallow in the mire with Prince Li. Yi Li lowered her head and thought for a moment before asking, "Who did Prince Li take with him when he left the capital?" Minister Yi had nothing to hide and said in a deep voice, "He only took that woman from Nanjiang." Even consort Xian Zhao was left in the capital. The Empress Dowager has already brought consort Xian Zhao to the palace. But now that Prince Li has rebelled, the Empress Dowager's life isn't easy. Thinking of this, Minister Yi felt regret in his heart. It was true that he was the Empress Dowager's man and he was biased towards Prince Li. But he never thought that Prince Li would suddenly rebel. If he had known that Prince Li was so crazy, he would have followed the emperor wholeheartedly. At least he had a Zhaoyi daughter and a prince's grandson. Now he had nothing. Fourth sister is under house arrest by the emperor? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and asked, "Why didn't Prince Li take her away? After all, she is his legal wife. Prince Li shouldn't not know what will happen to her if he leaves her in the capital." Minister Yi sighed helplessly and said, "Ying is already 2 months pregnant. It's not suitable for a long journey." Yi Li's mind turned. She looked up at Minister Yi and old Madame Yi and smiled faintly. "Prince Li doesn't know that fourth sister is pregnant, right? No matter how cruel Mo Jingli was, he wouldn't abandon his own flesh and blood, not to mention that Yiying was pregnant with his only child. The only possibility was that he did not know that Yiying was pregnant, and Yiying had found an excuse to stay." Old Madame Yi felt a bit guilty under her gaze and said embarrassedly, "That Princess Xixia isn't a good person and Prince Li spoils her too much." Within her scheming, the child would be gone before she could even reach Lingzhou. In any case, Prince Li spends most of his time in the capital every year, so we thought of letting stay in the capital to wait for delivery. How could Yi Li not understand old Madame Ye's intentions? Yi Zhaoyi and the little prince in the palace had died. Yi Ying finally had Prince Li's child. Naturally, she wanted to keep the child in the capital so that the child could be close to the Yi family in the future. But they didn't expect that Imo Jingli didn't even bother to inform them that he was going to attack. However, they had inadvertently saved the Yi family. Of course, the reason why the emperor did not punish the Yi family was probably because they were related to the Wang family. Yi Li sighed and looked at Minister Yi. Father, I'm afraid that the emperor already knows about fourth sister's pregnancy. He hasn't done anything to her yet. I'm afraid that he wants to use her child to threaten Prince Li. Minister Yi had already thought of this. He didn't really come to the Prince Ding mansion for Yi Ying. Then Yi Li raised her hand to stop him from speaking. She looked at Minister Yi and said, Father, this official knows that I don't understand. But the most taboo thing for those in power is for the people below to be disloyal. Father, you can't really think that the emperor doesn't know anything, right? In Li Er's opinion, Prince Li is not the opponent of that person in the palace. Minister Ye's expression changed slightly. You mean? Yi Li lowered her head and drank tea. She didn't answer and let Minister Yi sit there with his expression changing. Old Madame Yi couldn't sit still and quickly asked, Li Er, what should we do now? Yi Li said faintly, Father, report Prince Li's crime as soon as possible and ask for forgiveness from the emperor. As for the future, the emperor will no longer trust the Yi family. So father, it's best to ask the emperor to remove you from the position of minister. In the future, it's better to keep a low profile and teach Brother Rong well. This. Minister Yi and old Madame Yi were stunned. There was an unwilling expression on their faces. After thinking for a while, old Madame Yi looked at Yi Li cautiously and said, Li, Prince Ding has just quelled the rebellion in Yongzhou. Should we ask him? Looking at old Madame Ye's hopeful expression, Yi Li sneered and said faintly, Prince Ding's residence has done a lot to quell the rebellion. Grandmother doesn't know. Don't tell me that father doesn't know the current situation of Prince Ding's residence. Minister Yi could only sigh dejectedly. It was because Prince Ding's residence had done a lot that it was impossible to plead for him. The more Prince Ding pleaded, the more the emperor would suppress the Yi family. Minister Yi didn't know whether he should be resentful or not. Because of Prince Ding's residence, the emperor will never use the Yi family again. But it was also because of Prince Ding's residence, because his daughter was Princess Ding, the Yi family was saved from the disaster. Father, if you can pick it up, then you can let it go. When it's time to fight, fight. When it's time to retreat, retreat. No matter how good the fame and fortune are, can it be better than your own name? Yi Li said softly. Minister Yi paused for a while and there was a struggle on his face. Looking at Yi Li, he said, if in the future. Yi Li interrupted him. Father, be careful with your words. Minister Yi finally lowered his head dejectedly. He sighed and didn't say anything else. Old Madame Yi also understood that Yi Li had personally rejected asking Prince Ding to plead for leniency. She had cut off the last hope of the Yi family. Thinking that she would no longer be the old madam of minister's residence and that the Yi family would decline, she couldn't help but feel resentment in her heart. Li Er, how can you be so cruel? No matter how wrong your father is, he is still your father. Our Yi family is still your maternal family. What good will it do you if the Yi family declines? Prince Ding's residence doesn't have any relatives. Don't you want people to help you in the court in the future? Help? Yi Li murmured softly. She looked up at old Madame Ye's pained expression. Father and grandmother, have you gone to see eldest sister and Prince Nan? Old Madame Yi was speechless. They had already gone to Prince Li's residence when he was in trouble. Unfortunately, Prince Nan's residence had closed its doors and refused visitors. They didn't even see Prince Nan and Prince Nan. Only a few days ago, Yishan had quietly returned to Ye's residence once. The meaning behind her words was that Prince Nan's residents couldn't help. After all, as a subject, no one dared to provoke a rebellion. Last year, eldest uncle mentioned to me that father had been cautious all his life. These 2 years, he was a bit arrogant. I also mentioned it to grandmother. Unfortunately, at that time, grandmother and father only thought that I was resentful and jealous of second sister and fourth sister because I was married into the Prince Ding mansion. Now that things have come to this, not to mention that Prince Ding is unable to plead for father, even if he could, has father thought about how you will stand in the court in the future? On the way back, I also heard that these days, the emperor dotes on imperial concubine Yun and Wang Zhaorong. He even faintly revealed that he wanted to make imperial concubine Lu's son the crown prince. It seems that he wants to use the Yun and Wang family's people. The Lu family is even more popular. Father, whether it is the Lu family or the Yun and Wang families, they are all prestigious families. And the most important thing is, they don't get along with the Yi family. Father still doesn't understand the emperor's meaning. Chapter 238. In an instant, Minister Yi seemed to have aged 10 years. He said hoarsely, "I know. I'll go back and ask the emperor for forgiveness." Seeing Minister Ye's aged appearance, Yi Li secretly shook her head. She was not moved. Some people were born to view fame and fortune as more important than their lives, but there was no other way. Prince is back. The atmosphere in the parlor was a bit gloomy. A maid's voice came from outside the door. Before she finished speaking, Mo Xiaoyao had already entered the hall. After returning to the capital, he was called into the palace by Mo Xiaoyao before he even had time to change his clothes. Mo Xiaoyao was still wearing a white robe. There was a trace of tiredness between his brows that was hard to detect. "Greetings to Prince." Minister Yi and old Madam Yi hurriedly stood up and bowed. Mo Xiaoyao nodded slightly. He walked to Yi Li's side and sat down. "Lord Yi, old madam is here to see Li Li." Minister Yi nodded awkwardly and said, "That's right. Li He has been missing for several months. Mother and I are very worried. So when we heard that Prince brought Li He back, we hurriedly came to see." Mo Xiaoyao nodded calmly. He naturally did not care about this excuse. If they were worried, they would have been worried long ago. Why would they wait until now to worry? In these 2 months, the Yi family did not even send anyone to the Prince Ding mansion to ask about her, let alone send people to look for her. Even the Marquis Nan's mansion sent people to ask twice. In the eyes of outsiders, the Yi family was not only cold, but also heartless. Nurse Sun said that as soon as you came back, you were busy with the mansion's affairs. If you're tired, you should rest first. It won't be too late to talk about those trivial matters in a few days. Ignoring Minister Yi and old Madam Yi, Mo Xiaoyao turned to whisper to Yi Li. Yi Li smiled and shook her head. How could Minister Yi not see that Prince Ding did not want to see him? He was embarrassed to stay and could only stand up and leave. Looking at the cultured and elegant man sitting beside Yi Li, who could not conceal his awe-inspiring majesty, other than the silver mask that covered half of his face, where did he look sickly and disabled? If Prince Ding were to fully recover, the Ding royal residence's rise would be an ironclad matter. She only hated herself for having eyes but not being able to see. Back then, because the Ding palace was a taboo subject to the emperor and Prince Ding's health, she had neglected them. Now, it was too late to regret. Why did His Majesty summon you to the palace in such a hurry? Yi Li asked after having people send Minister Yi and old Madam Yi out. Mo Xiaoyao rubbed the space between his eyebrows and frowned. The emperor plans to marry a princess to the northern tribes for peace. Political marriage? Yi Li couldn't help but think of the marriage with Xiling Princess Lingyun last year. She frowned in confusion and asked, who does the emperor plan to send to the marriage? All of the previous emperor's princesses had already been married. Among Mo Jingxi's own daughters, the oldest seemed to be Princess Changel, who was 8 years old this year. Mo Xiaoyao calmly said, naturally, he will choose from the capital's nobility or the imperial family. The Duke of Hua's granddaughter is also on the list. Tianxiang. Yi Li frowned. The northern tribes was a bitter and cold place. Furthermore, everyone knew that the emperor chose this marriage to free up his hands to deal with the Prince of Li. Once the matter with the Prince of Li was over, who would remember that there was a woman in the distant northern tribes? If the two countries were to go to war, the princess in the marriage would only be a sacrifice. Mo Xiaoyao said, "You don't need to be too worried. His Majesty has to give face to the Duke of Hua and the Empress. Furthermore, if he really wants to marry the northern tribes, he will most likely choose someone from the imperial family. After all, the people of the northern tribes are not so easily fooled." Yi Li nodded and asked curiously, "Does the emperor need to specially summon you to the palace to discuss the marriage with the northern tribes?" Mo Xiaoyao's lips curled into a mocking smile. "When the princess is to be married, the emperor wishes for me to represent the Dechu state in sending the bride off. He also wishes for me to attend the king of the northern tribe's 60th birthday celebration in the 9th month. For the Prince of Dingwa to personally send the bride off, this type of marriage was somewhat unexpected." Yi Li furrowed her brows in thought. After a while, she raised her head and asked, "The emperor wishes for you to be transferred away from the Dechu state. Why?" The capital of the northern tribes was far in the north. If they wanted to make it in time for the king of the northern tribe's birthday celebration in the 9th month, the wedding procession would have to leave in the middle of the 7th month. Even if they rushed back after the wedding, Mo Xiaoyao would be back in the 10th month at the very least. In other words, Mo Xiaoyao would not be in the Dechu state for nearly 3 months. No one could imagine how many things could happen in 3 months. Mo Xiaoyao shook his head. The emperor has made many preparations these years. It is hard to guess what he wants to do in such a short period of time. It was not hard to guess the thoughts of a smart person. It was also not hard to guess the thoughts of an idiot. However, it was hard to guess the thoughts of those who were bold and imaginative. For example, Mo Jingli. Even someone as smart as Mo Xiaoyao and Su Qingchen would never have thought that he would start a rebellion at that time. Because anyone could tell at a glance that it was impossible for him to succeed. In reality, even if Mo Jingli really joined forces with the southern border to break through Shattered Snow Pass, Mo Jingli would not gain much of an advantage. It would only make the people at the border suffer. As the emperor, how much did Mo Jingqi care about the suffering of the people? "Then you agree?" Yi Li asked. Mo Xiaoyao raised his brows and smiled calmly. "The emperor's orders cannot be disobeyed." Yi Li shrugged helplessly. "I understand. I will stay in the capital." Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and smiled. "No, you will go to Yunzhou when the time comes." Yi Li raised her brows and looked at him in confusion. Mo Xiaoyao smiled. "Prince Ding is not the emperor. The Ding King Manor is not the imperial palace. There is no need for someone to guard it. Mo Jingqi, sometimes, when he is forced into a corner, he likes to use tricks that harm others without benefiting himself. I will be more assured if you go to Yunzhou." The true core of the Ding King Manor was not in the capital, but the people in the manor. Even if the Ding King Manor was razed to the ground, as long as the owner was still alive, the Ding King Manor would still be the Ding King Manor. Yi Li shook her head. "That is even more impossible. If I go to Yunzhou, won't I put grandfather and the rest in danger? Don't tell me that Mo Jingqi won't act against Yunzhou. Since they dared to act against the Prince Ding mansion, why would they be afraid of the Su family? Besides, the Prince Ding mansion's opponent is not just the one in the imperial palace." Mo Xiaoyao looked at Yi Li quietly. After a long time, he sighed. Li, I can't seem to let you live a peaceful life." Yi Li chuckled softly. "Of course I can live a peaceful life. You can find a place where no one knows and hide me. But I don't like that. Do you understand? Just like this trip to Nanjiang. I don't have to go. I can send someone. Even if no one goes, Big Brother will be fine. Even if I can't appear in front of people for the time being, I can find a place to live in seclusion for a while. It's because I want to go out for a walk that I want to go. Also, I feel that I like the days outside more. Even if there was danger outside, at least she had a clear goal and could distinguish between friend and foe. Once she returned to the capital, Yili felt a headache when she thought of facing those people who laughed and spoke warmly to each other but stabbed her in the back. It wasn't that she didn't know how to, but she didn't like it. I also feel that when Li Li is outside, she is even more stunning. Mo Xiaoyao laughed softly. In the capital, Li Li always had a faint smile on her face. She was gentle and elegant as if she was a qualified princess consort from a scholarly family. Mo Xiaoyao would never tell anyone that when he shot that arrow outside Yonglin City, he saw the woman in front of him wearing the same black clothes as the Black Cloud Cavalry. When she looked back, she had a cold and proud aura and a dazzling starlight in her eyes. There had never been a moment when he clearly understood that his princess consort was not only a graceful woman who held a scroll under the lamp, but also an outstanding figure who could move unhindered on the battlefield. Mo Xiaoyao suddenly thought of the oath he had made many years ago in front of his father and elder brother. Mo Xiaoyao's wife will be like my ancestor, Princess Qingyun, and follow me to conquer the world. Hand in hand, we will see the rivers and mountains together. That arrow, Mo Xiaoyao felt that perhaps what he shot out was not only the arrow that saved Li, but also his heart. Chapter 239. Yi Li's jade face blushed slightly. Ever since they reunited in Yonglin City, she and Mo Xiaoyao were always a bit strange when they interacted. Usually, she didn't think too much about it when there was something to do, but when it was quiet, it always made her feel uncomfortable. She wasn't some wooden block that didn't understand romance. Ever since that kiss outside Shattering Snow Pass, she naturally understood that the two of them were no longer close friends like before. But when facing Mo Xiaoyao, she couldn't bring out the freedom and casualness that she had when she was in love in her previous life. This kind of uncontrollable emotion made her feel some annoyance towards Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao seemed to understand her feelings and didn't provoke her too much. But when the two of them interacted in private, they were more intimate and gentle than before. How are Qing Wan and Qing Yu? Can you let them out? Yi Li tilted her head and asked in a low voice. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, it's nothing. Not letting them out is for their safety. Now that you've safely returned, it's naturally fine. I'll let them out later. Returning to her own courtyard, Qing Wan and Qing Yu's complexions were really good. It seemed that no one had made things difficult for them in these 2 months. Qing Xia and Qing Shuang were also busy surrounding Yi Li, giving her tonics and new clothes as if she had suffered greatly outside. Yi Li was helpless and could only let the servant girls busy themselves. When they calmed down a little, she sent Qing Xia and Qing Shuang away, leaving only Qing Yu and Qing Wan in front of her. Nubi has been negligent. Wang Fei, please punish. The room quieted down and Qing Yu and Qing Wan both knelt down. Rise. Yi Li frowned and looked at the two, asking, have you been well these 2 months? Qing Yu and Qing Wan couldn't help but wipe their tears. Qing Wan nodded repeatedly and said, we are fine, but we are very worried about the princess. If anything happens to the princess, we won't have the face to see the old master and the eldest master even if we die 10,000 times. Seeing the obvious joy and relief on their faces, Yi Li also understood that these two girls had been worried for the past 2 months. She sighed softly and said, what are you hiding? I understand Prince's temperament. You are my people. If you didn't hide something from me, he wouldn't have put you under house arrest for the past 2 months. Is it inconvenient to tell Prince, or is it something you can't even tell me? The two of them couldn't help but glance at each other. They looked at Yi Li with hesitation in their eyes. Yi Li didn't rush them. She just looked at them indifferently. After a long while, Qing Yu looked at Yi Li and finally made up her mind. She said, we servants have indeed failed in our duties. Actually, this servant had already left Yaohua Palace before the fire. After that, Qing Wan also left in order to save this servant. So, after the fire in Yaohua Palace, the Shadow Guard couldn't find us. Yi Li nodded, then, where did you go? This servant saw a person, so I followed. Qing Yu whispered. This servant heard Qing Yu's scream and followed. Qing Luan continued. Yi Li frowned. Who did you see? Qing Yu whispered, Su Zuidi and Prince. Su Zuidi and Prince. Yi Li blinked in surprise. You mean you saw Su Zuidi and Prince together in the palace, so you followed them? Are you sure you saw Su Zuidi? Qing Yu lowered her head in thought for a while. This servant has seen the painting of Chu Jing country sent by others at the wedding of Prince and Princess. It is at least 70 to 80% similar to the woman in the painting. There are not many people who look so beautiful even in the palace. And Your Highness. Your Highness, that is why the servant. Yi Li nodded slightly. She understood why these two girls had been unwilling to tell the truth to Mo Xiaoyao. So, you saw Prince meeting a woman who looked very similar to Su Zuidi in the palace, and it happened that Yaohua Palace was on fire and I was missing, so you deliberately concealed it and refused to tell him the truth. Qing Yu bit her lip and nodded. Yi Li thought for a while and asked, have you ever thought, if Prince's legs were inconvenient at that time, wouldn't it be too eye-catching to meet a woman in the palace? With Prince's martial arts, he shouldn't let you get too close. If you didn't get close, how can you be sure that the person you saw was Su Zuidi and Prince? Qing Yu said, this servant is not sure whether that woman is Su Zuidi or not. But the man's voice is definitely Prince's. Yi Li frowned. She knew about Qing Yu's hearing. Qing Yu's hearing was very good since she was a child, even better than Qing Luan who practiced martial arts since childhood. As long as she heard the voice once, she would never forget it, not to mention that she saw Mo Xiaoyao every day. Then what about Qing Luan? This servant heard Qing Yu scream. Although Qing Yu knows how to use poison, she doesn't know martial arts, so this servant immediately rushed over. But as soon as she saw Qing Yu's back, she fainted. Qing Yu frowned and said, this servant heard that Prince was indeed shocked and then knocked out. But, it was just a very low voice, it was impossible to alarm Qing Luan. Yi Li smiled and said, you guys have worked hard these past 2 months. Tell me, what do you think? The two couldn't help but look at each other. Qing Luan carefully glanced at Yi Li before saying, this servant didn't think anything. Qing Yu said, this servant suspected Prince and someone, then heard that Princess was missing, so, Yi Li smiled and said, so you suspect that Prince and others conspired to kill me? Qing Yu's face turned red. Qing Luan stared at Qing Yu with her eyes wide open, looking frightened. Yi Li understood that what they said should be true. After all, Qing Luan and Qing Yu lived separately in these 2 months. There was no chance to see each other at all. The secret guards had also found them from different places. Unless they had made a confession before the secret guards found them, there was nothing they could say about the two of them. These 2 months, Qing Luan was very quiet. It was just that in the beginning, she cried every day. On the contrary, Qing Yu, who had always been quiet, always tried to escape and was always hostile to the people in the Wangfu. If it was because Qing Yu saw Mo Xiaoyao and Qing Luan didn't see him, it would make sense. After thinking for a while, Yi Li nodded and said, I understand. Qing Yu, don't mention this matter again in the future. I believe in Prince, understand? Qing Yu frowned slightly and wanted to say something. Yi Li said faintly, sometimes, what you hear with your ears may not be the truth. Have you ever thought that if it was really Prince, with Prince's meticulous mind, would he appear in the palace on the day he knew that I entered the palace? In addition, the biggest flaw is that all of you are still alive. You were knocked unconscious because you found out about Prince. Then, forget about Qing Luan, why are you still safe and sound until now? This is the Ding Palace. If His Highness wants to silence people, not to mention all of you, even I, the princess consort, would not be able to escape. Do you understand? Qing Yu's face turned pale. Princess consort's meaning is. Qing Luan was puzzled and said, if the other party wants to sow discord, does he know that the princess is fine in the fire? Chapter 240. Yi Li nodded and said with a smile, it's very likely. However, if something really happens to me, and the prince knows that you are indeed innocent, he will naturally let you go. What will Qingyu do after going out? Qingyu said firmly, naturally, I will report this matter to the old master and the eldest young master, and seek justice for Miss. Qing Luan exclaimed, the other party wants to sow discord between the Ding King's mansion and the Su family. Yili held her forehead and said, whether he wants to sow discord between me and the prince, or sow discord between the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family, it depends on whether he knows about the fire in Yaohua Palace. In fact, it's the same. If my relationship with the prince is broken, how can the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family be good? Qingyu said with a pale face, I suspect that the prince did something wrong. But what she couldn't figure out was who that person was. She was definitely more confident in her ears than her eyes. It doesn't matter. Fortunately, the prince also suspected that you knew something dangerous, so he put you under house arrest. Now, there are no bad consequences. As for the prince you mentioned, I will check what's going on later. Yili said with a smile, and a cold light flashed in her eyes. Sure enough, as soon as she returned to the capital, there were endless troubles. Then let her see if there was a second Su Zuodi and Mo Xiaoyao in the capital. Qingyu nodded seriously and said, this servant also wants to know who can deceive this servant's ears. Yili smiled faintly. Seeing with one's own eyes could deceive people, let alone hearing with one's ears. However, she also wanted to know who could know her and the people around her so well. Yili told Mo Xiaoyao about Qingyu and Qing Luan, and Mo Xiaoyao turned around and ordered people to investigate. No matter who the person impersonating Mo Xiaoyao was, that woman was definitely not Su Zuodi. There was someone who wanted to use this matter to sow discord between the two of them and even the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Su family. It could be seen that this person absolutely understood the Prince Ding mansion and Mo Xiaoyao himself. As for being impersonated, Mo Xiaoyao wasn't worried at all. This was because the subordinates in King Ding's residence had always accepted orders and not people. Although the prince and princess consort were not an exception, but everyone knew that Prince Ding would never casually give orders to the people below him. Moreover, if those shadow guards couldn't even recognize the real prince, they wouldn't be able to survive. On the second day after returning to Beijing, Yili personally went to the Su family to visit her uncle and aunt. Although ordinary people didn't know about what happened in Yonglin City, it definitely couldn't be hidden from the influential officials in the palace who had various channels of information. Moreover, Mo Xiaoyao had recovered and naturally had to take on the responsibility of being the prince of Ding country, so Yili, Princess Ding, naturally didn't need to deliberately keep a low profile. As soon as she stepped into the Su family's residence, Su Qingyan came out like a gust of wind, pulling Yili and chattering non-stop. Seeing this, the veins on Su Hongyan's forehead were throbbing. Qingyan. Su Qingyan's face stiffened and he winked at Yili for help before turning back to smile at Su Hongyan. Second uncle, aren't we happy to see Sister Li come back? Su Qingze looked at him indifferently and didn't say anything. Su Qingbai glanced at him unhappily and said, we are all very happy that Li is back. Look at you. Fortunately, we're not in Yunzhou. If grandfather and father saw you, they would definitely punish you. Su Qingyan shrunk his neck and made a face at his fourth brother. Yili felt warmth in her heart when she saw her relatives. She smiled and said, second uncle, second brother, fourth brother, don't blame fifth brother. Li is also very happy to see you after not seeing you for a long time. Su Hongyan looked at Yili and nodded with satisfaction, it seems that you didn't suffer outside these days. Your complexion is much better than when you were in Beijing. Madame Su had already come forward and pulled Yili to ask about her well-being. She felt sorry for her for going out alone and felt that she had lost a lot of weight and needed to be nourished. Knowing that they had serious matters to discuss, Madame Su pulled Yili aside and said a few words. Then she turned around and ordered the kitchen to prepare lunch, leaving her husband and sons alone. After entering the study and sitting down, before she could say anything, Su Qingyan couldn't stop fidgeting. He looked at Yili and said, Sister Li, you really went to guard Yonglin? Yi Li raised her eyebrows in surprise and said, even you know about it? It seems that news spread quickly in the border city. Su Qingyan waved his hand and said, Sister Li, you don't know. Some news is indeed a secret outside, but once it reaches the capital, it's no longer a secret. There are many people who know about this. A few days ago, someone asked me about you in a roundabout way. Humph. Are you bullying me because I'm young and easy to fool? Su Qingze nodded and looked at Yi Li. Little Wu is right. There aren't many sources of information that can reach Shattered Snow Pass. But in this capital, there aren't many secrets that can be hidden. Yi Li waved her hand and said, that's fine. I've already discussed this with the prince. Originally, it wasn't a secret that Princess Ding could mobilize the Black Cloud Cavalry. After all, I went to Yonglin on the battlefield. There are many things that can't be hidden even if I want to. It doesn't matter if people know about it. Su Hongyan frowned and said, Prince means. Looking at the beautiful niece in front of him who looked similar to his little sister, Su Hongyan wasn't sure if it was what he thought. After all, although the Ding prince didn't like women, he was very respectful to the princess regardless of her background. But the princess who truly controlled the military power of the Prince Ding mansion was only Princess Qing Yun 100 years ago. If Prince Ding and Li Although he was happy that Prince Ding valued and trusted his niece, Su Hongyan was worried about this. Once she controlled the military power of the Ding mansion, Li would no longer be as simple as a princess. When the time came, the problems that she would face wouldn't be something that her uncle could help her with. Yi Li looked at Su Hongyan and said seriously, Li understands uncle's worries, but, since the day of the wedding, Li has been tied to the Prince Ding mansion. If some things can't be avoided, then there is no harm in facing them head-on. It's better to have two people than one. Su Hongyan couldn't help but sigh. Although he didn't ask about the emperor's actions in court these days, it wasn't that he didn't understand. Ever since Prince Li raised his troops, the emperor had supported the Lu, Wang, and Yun families. It could even be said that he didn't hide the fact that he used the eradication of Prince Li's faction to suppress the former officials of the Prince Ding mansion. These years, the emperor had placed many people in court. Now, the Wang and Yun families had suddenly replaced the original Yi family and even had the tendency to surpass the Hua family. What was worse was that for some reason, the Lu, Wang, and Yun families had secretly formed a group. Originally, the separation of the three powers wasn't very obvious, but now, in the blink of an eye, the emperor's people had taken the lead. Su Qingyan wouldn't believe that the emperor's actions were to deal with Prince Li. Su Hongyan naturally understood that the emperor didn't put his younger brother in his eyes. His true goal was always the Prince Ding mansion. Chapter 241. Su Qing's voice was cold as usual, but there was a faint warmth in his eyes as he looked at Yi Li. If Li has the ability, then there's no harm in accepting it. Su Hongyan nodded helplessly and looked at Yi Li lovingly. Your first uncle mentioned it in his letter a few days ago. Since you were able to bring people to Yongzhou, he probably guessed Prince Ding's intentions. But you have to be careful in the future. Other than your third brother, everyone in our family is a scholar, so I'm afraid they won't be of much help. Su Hongyan wasn't a military officer, but that didn't mean he didn't understand military officers. Military officers were different from civil officials, especially famous generals on the battlefield. They didn't care about your identity or status. If you couldn't convince the public, even if you were the emperor's daughter, they wouldn't listen to you. Yi Li nodded and smiled. Second uncle, don't worry. This time in Yongzhou, Prince Ding gave me a pretty good lieutenant under General Murong's command, as well as the Black Cloud Cavalry's commander who was guarding Yonglin. We can all be considered acquaintances, so there's no need to worry too much. As for the other matters, we can talk about it later. Su Hongyan's brows relaxed as he nodded. Prince Ding is still the most considerate. Su Qingyan smiled. If he knew Li could lead the Mahist army, why would third brother run to the barracks himself? Wouldn't it be fine if he just followed Li? Su Hongyan glared at him. Nonsense, if Qingfeng didn't have a future in the barracks, wouldn't he be a burden to Li Er? If he had a future, why wouldn't it be the same? Su Qingyan blinked. I just feel that with third brother here, Li Er would be more at ease. Yi Li smiled. It's too early to say this. I don't have time to manage the Mahist army right now. Moreover, with third brother's personality, if he knew that it was because of me that he entered the Mahist army, I'm afraid he would run far away and insist on making a name for himself. Thinking of his son's temperament, Su Hongyan couldn't help but smile, but he seemed to be very satisfied. He said earnestly to Yi Li, although Prince trusts you, you have to remember that there are many things that you have to distinguish between public and private matters. Whether it was the royal family or anything else, the biggest taboo was having too many relatives. Does Li Er understand? Yi Li's heart warmed as she nodded and said, Li Er understands. Many thanks for uncle's teachings. Seeing that Yi Li had listened to his words, Su Hongyan nodded with relief and sighed softly. Li Er was really different from his smart but weak little sister. Although Li Er's surname was not Su, he still had a kind of pride and gratification of having a daughter in his family. She believed that her father would be extremely happy to see such a Li Er. Yi Li then recounted her trip to Nanzhao and Su Qingchen in detail. Su Hongyan frowned in disapproval and said, putting yourself in danger, Qingchen is taking too much of a risk. Su Qingbai wasn't worried about his big brother's safety at all. He smiled and said, second uncle, don't worry. When has big brother ever done something he wasn't confident in? Didn't Li Er also say that even if she didn't go to Nanjiang, big brother would still be able to escape? Su Qingyan nodded and said, fourth brother is right. Sister Li, is that saintess of Nanjiang very beautiful? Why did she capture big brother but not harm him? She didn't even force a confession out of him. Could it be that she has taken a fancy to big brother? It had to be said that to a certain extent, Su Qingyan was speaking the truth. Yi Li blinked and shook her head with some regret. I haven't seen the saintess of Nanjiang, but she shouldn't be bad. Su Qingbai raised his brows and said, I feel that Princess Anxi is interested in big brother. Second brother, tell me. Su Qingze put down his teacup and said indifferently, neither is possible. Big brother only sees Princess Anxi as a friend. Su Qingyan hid behind Su Qingbai and bared his teeth at his second brother. He muttered in a low voice, you're so unromantic. I really don't know how Sister Qing can stand you. Su Qingbai looked curiously at Yi Li and asked, Li lied to Princess Anxi that you're big brother's fiancé. What did big brother say? Hearing this, Su Qingyan's eyes lit up and he stared at Yi Li. Yi Li gritted her teeth in annoyance. She should have known that she had been deceived by big brother. He didn't even write a letter to tell uncle and the others about it. In the end, she was the one who exposed the truth. She carefully glanced at her second uncle and said in a low voice, big brother didn't say anything. And he even used me as a shield. Su Hongyan shook his head helplessly and said, your status is different. Although it's important to investigate your big brother's whereabouts, you have to be careful about your reputation. Li understands. Su Hongyan didn't reprimand her. Yi Li sighed in relief and laughed crisply. Right, I haven't congratulated second brother, fourth brother, and fifth brother for passing the imperial examinations. Su Hongyan shook his head and glared at Su Qingyan in annoyance. Although things hadn't been going well since the beginning of spring, the triennial imperial examinations were still held as usual. Originally, it wasn't a big deal. After all, no one thought that the sons of the Su family would fail. However, the fact that the three sons of the Su family had passed the imperial examinations at the same time inevitably raised eyebrows. Su Qingyan pursed his lips in grievance and said, I was just casually writing. Who knew that the questions this year would be so simple? Under the gaze of everyone in the room, Su Qingyan finally couldn't argue anymore and could only lower his head guiltily. How could he say that he had given it his all because some son of a noble family had mocked him a few times? Yi Li smiled and said, so this time. Second brother came in third, fifth brother came in fourth, and fourth brother came in 19th. Su Qingyan stole a glance at Su Qingbai and lowered his head even more guiltily. Of course, he knew that fourth brother's talent was definitely above his own. Second brother could definitely leave the top and second place far behind. However, they had purposely held back their true abilities. He had indeed done his best, but he had only gotten fourth place. Seeing Su Qingyan's guilty appearance, Yi Li advised, "Second uncle, this is nothing. If fifth brother really failed, I'm afraid that people would be suspicious." Su Hongyan frowned and said, "He shouldn't have participated in the imperial examinations this year." Speaking of this, Su Hongyan also felt helpless. Qingyan was only 14 years old, and Qingbai was only 16 or 17. As a man, even if he was a member of the Su family, who didn't want to be famous and have a good achievement? The children of the Su family, whether it was the steady Su Qingze or the lively Su Qingyan, if they weren't part of the Su family, they would definitely be the top scorers of the imperial examinations. Their future prospects would naturally be limitless. However, as part of the Su family, they could only have empty ambitions. They could enjoy the false reputation of the Su family, but they couldn't do anything. This was all because of the Su family's reputation. Su Hongyan would always remember the heavy and apologetic expression his father had when he left the capital with his eldest brother. He used to have the heart to help the world, but unfortunately, the royal family didn't need his ambition. The royal family only needed him to stay in the seemingly noble position of imperial censor, which actually had no real power, to show the world the royal family's benevolence. Since second brother, fourth brother, and fifth brother are all on the imperial examinations, will they stay in the capital? Yi Li asked. Su Qingze and Su Qingbai were fine. Su Qingze was already 20 years old, and his temperament was even more steady. Although Su Qingbai was still young, he was indeed the most experienced and skilled in the Su family. Not only was Su Qingyan young, but his temperament was also like a child who hadn't grown up. Su Hongyan shook his head and said, "Your second brother and fourth brother will stay. I've already sent a memorial to the emperor. Qingyan is still young, and his father is old. He needs to return to Yunzhou to serve his father." Chapter 242. Will the emperor agree? In Imo Jingqi's eyes, keeping Su Qingyan was far more useful than keeping Su Qingbai. Su Hongyan smiled calmly. Xiao Wu is the youngest in the Su family. Of all virtues, filial piety is the most important. The emperor has no choice but to agree. Since second uncle was so confident, Yi Li did not ask any more questions. She changed her mind to care about Su Qingze and Su Qingbai's positions. Su Qingze, as the Tanhua, was sent to Hanlin Academy to be an editor. Su Qingbai, as a scholar, was sent to the Ministry of Rites as a substitute. They were all idle positions without any real power. Compared to the top scholars and scholars, their ranks were the highest, but at the same time, they had the least power. Especially Su Qingbai. His salary as the minister counselor of the Ministry of Rites was indeed an empty title. Who knew when he would be able to make up for it? Most importantly, Su Qingze and Su Qingbai's personalities were not suitable for their positions. It would be better if they were swapped. Second brother must stay in the capital. If fourth brother can, it's best if he's sent out. Su Qingbai looked young and gentle, but his thoughts were deep. He was a classic example of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. If it were not for the Su family, even if he was born in an ordinary family, he would most likely become an important official before the age of 36. Actually, Su Qingbai was the most suitable person in the Su family to be an official. Su Hongyan shook his head. How could the emperor be at ease to send him out? Yi Li frowned. Not necessarily. Fourth brother is still young. Perhaps the emperor will be more at ease. But I'm afraid it'll be hard on fourth brother. Su Qingbai smiled lightly. The places the emperor is willing to send me to are those barren hills and unruly rivers. But it's better than staying in the capital, doing nothing and being controlled by others. Su Hongyan looked at Su Qingbai. He understood that he was moved by Yi Li's suggestion. That's right. If he had a choice, he would rather be sent out. Even if he was a county official, it was better than staying in the capital and listening to those civil officials talk. After thinking for a moment, Su Hongyan nodded and said, "That's fine. Right now, the emperor is busy. He should agree to this concession." Su Qingbai nodded and said with a faint smile, "Many thanks, second uncle." Su Hongyan waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say more. Yi Li accompanied her uncle and aunt to have lunch and prepared to return to the Fu. Before leaving, Su Hongyan instructed in a deep voice, "Li, in the future, you must be careful of the people in the palace." Yi Li was stunned. She looked at her uncle in surprise. Su Hongyan just waved his hand and didn't say anything more. Yi Li had no choice but to bid farewell to her uncle and aunt before turning around to return home. When he returned to his residence, there were already 2 thick piles of invitation cards and banquet invitations from the various residences in the capital. Yi Li flipped through the photos and picked out a few important ones to reply to. She felt a headache coming on as she realized that she might need one or more all-around assistants. Qing Xia and Qing Shuang didn't know much to begin with. Although Qing Luan and Qing Yu each had their own strengths, they had nothing to do with this. Han Mingxi was a good candidate, but he was too eye-catching. After going through the people around her that she could use, she finally called over an heir and an San and threw them a pile of documents to be dealt with. And San had a bitter face as he realized that they originally didn't need to do anything and only needed to secretly follow their master's shadow guard. Then they became the personal bodyguards of the young masters, the all-around bodyguards of the eldest young miss, and the all-around bodyguards of the Princess Ding. Then they became the accountants of the Ding Palace, as well as various stewards. The power was so big that San couldn't help but tremble. He wanted to cry but had no tears. "Princess consort. I don't understand this, go and learn." Yi Li's pen was like the wind as she read through the documents in her hands. She didn't even raise her head as she said. San had a bitter face. "Princess consort, we are the shadow guard." Yi Li faintly raised her head and glanced at him, saying, "I don't need a shadow guard. In the future, Qin Feng will follow me. He is the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry." San unwillingly muttered. Even if Princess Consort needed someone to help settle accounts, she should find Chief Steward Mo and Nurse Sunday, otherwise, she should let Qin Feng settle accounts. Why did she let him do such a sissy thing and then let Qin Feng take his position? Yi Li nodded with satisfaction, saying, "It's really because he is the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry. When he helps me, he can also be a bodyguard. You guys can also be my assistant." Assistant? San had a blank face and an heir had a stupefied expression. What was an assistant? It didn't sound like a shadow guard at all. Yi Li smiled wholeheartedly as she looked at the 2 subordinates that she used very easily. "It's the people who will help me deal with everything." "Everything?" "That's right. Everything that I need you to help me deal with." An heir and San were smart enough, loyal enough, and skilled enough. An heir was steady and San was nimble. After following her for so long, they didn't have the restraint of others. They were simply born to be assistants. Thinking that she could free herself from the heavy chores to do other things that she didn't have time for, Yi Li was in a good mood. "Go find Uncle Mo first. Learn what you need to learn in half a month. Otherwise, the next 3 months, the Black Cloud Peak will be your home. I just happened to think of a lot of new things recently." Seeing their master's gentle smile and thinking of the month of struggle in the forest last year, the 2 trembled at the same time. They cleanly turned and left. Hearing the 2 subordinates run away, Yi Li couldn't help but shake her head with a chuckle. "Princess Consort, Yunting Gongzi and Qin Feng Gongzi are asking for an audience." Qing Luan came in to report. "Let them in." Yunting's home was near the capital. After leaving Yongzhou, he parted ways with them. They went east to Guangling, and Yunting went north to return home. At this time, he went to the Prince Ding mansion with Qin Feng, which made Yi Li a little surprised. After a while, the two entered the study side by side. Subordinate Yunting, Qin Feng greets Princess Consort. Yi Li said with a smile, no need. Yunting, has your home been settled? Yunting said with a hearty smile, many thanks for Princess Consort's concern. Everything is good at home. Yi Li nodded with satisfaction and looked at Qin Feng. Qin Feng respectfully reported, subordinate has prepared the things that Princess Consort ordered. I'm just waiting for Princess Consort to personally inspect. Yi Li looked at the few remaining account books on the table and nodded, it's still early. Let's go now. Yunting, someone will send you to the barracks later. Also, Prince Ding has recommended several military books. Finish them all in 3 months. After 3 months, as long as you pass the test, you can officially become a member of the Mahist army. Understand? Yunting's eyes lit up. He said in a clear voice, Yunting understands. I promise I'll finish them all in 3 months. Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded with satisfaction. Yunting was filled with joy. Because of the ecstasy of being able to enter the Mahist army, he forgot to ask how many books there were, and what he was going to do in the barracks in the next 3 months. Because of this, he was not like this for the next 3 months. After changing into men's clothing, Yi Li took Qin Feng out of the Fu with slight anticipation. During this time, they encountered An San, who had just received a large pile of overdue account books from Chief Steward Mo and was currently looking at Qin Feng with a resentful gaze. This caused the leader of the Shadow Guard, who was not used to following Yi Li, to feel an inexplicable chill down his spine. The two left Jing City. Qin Feng looked at the youth in front of him who, other than his lack of height, was still handsome and elegant. He couldn't help but be filled with admiration. He finally understood why when Princess Consort left Jing City, no one could find her. Even the Shadow Guard of the Ding King's Fu could not find any trace of Princess Consort. This kind of disguise was much better than the so-called disguise techniques of the Jianghu. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, even if Princess Consort was standing in front of him, he would have thought that she was a slightly familiar person and let her pass. Chapter 243. Raising her head, she saw Qin Feng's strange gaze. Yi Li smiled and said, don't be so shocked, it's just a little disguise. Qin Feng shook his head and said, Wang Fei's disguise isn't something that just anyone knows. The so-called disguise wasn't just changing one's appearance. True tracking experts might not look at the face or the clothing on a person's body. Rather, it was easy to find clues from a person's habitual movements, figure, back, etc. But just now, when he had followed behind Wang Fei, he didn't find any similarities between Wang Fei's movements when she was dressed as a man and when she was dressed as a woman. Even when Wang Fei was dressed as a man, her walking posture, her expression, and her eyes didn't look like a woman's at all. She looked just like a handsome young master of 14 or 15 years old. Qin Feng didn't know why Wang Fei, as a daughter of a noble family, would know these things, but since the prince trusted Wang Fei, and they had personally seen Wang Fei's abilities in Yonglin City, then he naturally would follow Wang Fei's orders. Qin Feng followed Yi Li on a fast horse to the foot of Black Cloud Peak. Last time, he had come to this place with the prince. But in a year, it had changed a bit. 2 villages stood at the foot of the mountain that was originally somewhat remote and barren. A small village was built on the foundation of the original mountain village on the mountainside. The people at the foot of the mountain were busy working in the fields. It looked no different from the normal villages outside Jing. The two dismounted and went up the mountain. They circled around the village at the foot of the mountain and came to the edge of the cliff at the back of the mountain. Qin Feng looked down. It wasn't very deep. Wang Fei, are we going down? Yi Li looked at him with a smile and said, I heard that your Black Cloud Cavalry's martial arts aren't bad. If you aren't afraid of death, jump down and see. Qin Feng looked suspiciously at the bottom of the cliff and frowned. With his martial arts, even if it wasn't easy to go down, it wouldn't be life-threatening unless there were some traps below. With Yi Li's warning, Qin Feng did not rashly use his Qinggong to jump down. Instead, he used something like the wall climbing technique to slowly slide down the cliff. Fortunately, he had a dagger with him. Even if he stuck it into a crack in the rock, he wouldn't have slipped down. With great difficulty, he finally found a protruding spot. Before he could step on it, he discovered that the protruding spot had an arrow tip that was shining with a cold light. Qin Feng had no doubt that he would be turned into a hornet's nest if he were to lightly touch it. Helplessly, he held his dagger and carefully avoided the dangers one by one as he slid down the cliff. Below his feet was a clear lake. There were even green lotus leaves and a few flower buds floating on the surface of the water. However, the various cold glints on the surface of the water were definitely there to mock him. Qin Feng took a deep breath and used his qinggong to cross the lake, not daring to let his feet touch the surface of the water. 3 steps to the left. Yi Li's voice sounded from nearby. Qin Feng, who was about to land, hurriedly took 3 steps to the left before landing on the ground. He tilted his head to look at Wang Fei, who had clearly been waiting for him for a long time. Yi Li looked sardonically at him. She picked up a pebble from the ground and threw it at the spot he had just landed on. Whoosh whoosh! After a fierce rain of arrows came from all directions, Qin Feng looked speechlessly at the place he had just landed on that was filled with arrows. He couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Wang Fei, Qin Feng looked at the smiling and gentle woman in front of him and felt his scalp tingle. He stood where he was and didn't dare to move a step. He didn't want to use his body to test whether or not every inch of the surrounding area was filled with traps. He looked at the clear and quiet lake that did not seem to be dangerous at all. He swore that the sight of the lake filled with arrows was not his imagination. If someone really did not know what was good for them and jumped down using their qinggong, that person would probably become an enormous hedgehog. Yi Li said with a smile, "Don't be nervous. It's just a joke. This place is not like this normally." Qin Feng was silent. He believed that it would be more dangerous normally. Yi Li turned and pointed at the endless forest behind her. She asked with a smile, "Have you been here before?" Qin Feng looked and hesitated before shaking his head. He said, "It is not convenient to train soldiers near Jing. The Black Cloud Cavalry usually train at a place a few hundred li away from Jing. Also, the Black Cloud Cavalry were cavalry. Even if they trained, they would usually train in the wilderness or desert. In the forest, cavalry could not be used at all." Yi Li said with a smile, "When will the person I want arrive?" Qin Feng hesitated. "They should arrive in 2 hours." Qin Feng really did not have much confidence when he said this. Wang Fei had only given him a bunch of maps that could not be any simpler. Also, each map was not the same. Even though the Black Cloud Cavalry were skilled in tracking, he still had to look at the map for a long time before he was able to determine the approximate location. He did not know if the Black Cloud Cavalry would be able to find the place. As for what Wang Fei said about being disqualified if they were discovered by the commoners, Qin Feng did not even think about it. Even if the soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry were new recruits, if they did not want to, they would not be discovered by a group of commoners. How many can they arrive? The Black Cloud Cavalry and the Mahist army near Jing each chose 50 elite soldiers. Even if they cannot all arrive, at least 70 or 80 should not be a problem. Qin Feng thought for a moment and said, "Wang Fei." Qin Feng hesitated but still felt that he should clarify the question that had puzzled him for many days. He was the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry. Even though he was not the highest commander and only had 2,000 people under him, he still felt that he should be responsible for the elite soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry. If Wang Fei felt that the Shadow Guard was not satisfied, then she should have the Shadow Guard commander train more and choose better ones. Even though transferring 50 elite soldiers would not affect the strength of the Black Cloud Cavalry, what was the use of these soldiers? If they were to be used as Shadow Guard, 70 or 80 people was clearly too many. Also, the Prince Ding mansion had Shadow Guards to begin with. If communication was not good, it could easily cause conflict between the Shadow Guard and the Black Cloud Cavalry. If they were to be used on the battlefield, 70 or 80 people, no matter how elite, would not be of much use. After all, using one person's strength to fight against an army of thousands was the same as throwing their lives away. You are thinking too much. Seeing Qin Feng's hesitation and conflict, Yi Li said with a helpless smile, "Don't worry about this. I also transferred 30 people from the Shadow Guard. Let's see who gets here first. Do you want to make a bet?" Qin Feng thought about how he had heard San mention Wang Fei's gambling skills in Yonglin. He thought for a moment and said firmly, "Black Cloud Cavalry." Without a doubt, of the three groups, the Black Cloud Cavalry's combat strength and mobility far surpassed the others. Maybe their martial arts were not as good as some people in the Shadow Guard, but their courage had to be known. Other than the Shadow Guard specially trained for the Prince and Wang Fei, not all the other Shadow Guard were strong in martial arts. As for the Black Cloud Cavalry, every single one of them had undergone strict training and were already used to fighting as one. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and said disapprovingly, "I feel that the Shadow Guard will arrive first, followed by the Black Cloud Cavalry, but the Mahist army will have the most people." Chapter 244. That is not possible. Qin Feng decisively rejected it. He did not have any intentions of looking down on the Mahist army, but he could not deny that the Black Cloud Cavalry was stronger than the Mahist army. In a 50 versus 50 situation, the Mahist army could not win against the Black Cloud Cavalry. Let's wait and see. Yi Li had removed most of the traps on the lake and under the cliff. She was amazed by the design of the traps. She did not dare to underestimate the wisdom of the ancient people. Originally, she had been considering if she should make some unconventional things to defend this mountain valley. Now, it seemed that she did not need to waste the effort. If all the traps in the valley were activated, and she did not know about it beforehand, even she did not have the confidence that she could escape unscathed. The simple buildings in the valley that had been equipped with arrows had been removed and replaced with a neat circle of wooden houses. In order to prevent sneak attacks from the snakes, rats, ants, and wild beasts in the forest, they had specially built walls around the perimeter and planted plants that repelled snakes and insects. All of this had taken almost 10 months of time and had just been completed a month ago. At the same time, she had spent all the silver that Han Mingyue had given her and her dowry. However, she had earned quite a bit from the trip to the Wind and Moon Pavilion. So when Yi Li saw everything in front of her, she felt satisfied and did not feel any heartache. 2 hours later, a black-clothed figure jumped down from the cliff and landed disheveled on the ground. Qin Feng looked. It was someone from the Shadow Guard. He snorted disdainfully and sighed. If Wang Fei had not removed the traps, that guy would have been shot through already. But he also understood that if Wang Fei had not warned him, he would not be much better off than that guy. This subordinate, and 17, greets Gongzi. Yi Li nodded and indicated for him to rest on the side. A short while later, another figure appeared. It was still someone from the Shadow Guard. Then it was the Black Cloud Cavalry, and then it was the Mahist army. Qin Feng quickly found that it was different. The Shadow Guard and the Mahist army mostly moved alone and arrived alone. However, the soldiers of the Mo family army were traveling in groups. Therefore, every time they arrived, they would arrive in groups of 4 to 5. Although they weren't as agile as the Shadow Guard and the Mahist army, they were the ones with the most manpower. 4 hours later, Yi Li clapped her hands and gestured for everyone to get up. "Greetings, young master." Yi Li nodded and glanced at the people in front of her. There were only 63 of them. There were 28 members of the Mahist army, 20 members of the Black Cloud Cavalry, and 15 members of the Shadow Guard. Break up the formation. I want to see that the people standing on your left and right are people that you don't know and are not from the same team. Although these people didn't understand Yi Li's intentions, they still obeyed her orders and quickly returned to their positions. Yi Li nodded in satisfaction. She had finally found some feeling. She pointed to the wooden house behind her and said, "From today onwards, you will live here for the next 3 months. Those who pass the final test can stay. The rest can return to their original places. If you're free, come and get to know the instructor who will be guiding you." Yi Li clapped her hands lightly. 8 men of different heights, young and old, walked in front of Yi Li and said in unison, "Young master." Qin Feng, who was standing beside Yi Li, couldn't help but raise the corner of his eyes. Although he couldn't tell where these people came from, without exception, they all exuded the aura of a powerhouse from the inside out. Without exception, they were all experts among experts. Yi Li nodded in satisfaction and said with a smile, "Everyone, other than the training that I have arranged for you every day, these people will also be providing you with special guidance. Of course, if any of you can be placed in any of them, then this test can be skipped. How about it, do you want to give it a try?" These words definitely carried a hint of provocation. Soldiers, no matter which era they were from, were definitely the most hot-blooded type of people. Almost immediately, one of them flew towards one of the 8 who seemed to be the strongest, while the others also chose their own targets. With a series of "kacha" sounds, the people who pounced on them all fell to the ground and couldn't get up. The youngest person clapped his hands and said to Yi Li with disdain, "Young master, aren't the people you chose too weak?" Yi Li smiled indifferently and said, "They aren't martial arts experts to begin with. I also don't need a group of top experts." The young man raised his eyebrows in confusion. "If you don't need martial arts experts, then what do you want us to do?" Yi Li asked with a smile. "Can you teach martial arts experts in 3 months?" The young man was speechless. No matter how conceited he was, he knew that learning martial arts wasn't something that could be accomplished in a day. Even he, who had been praised as a martial arts genius since he was young, had to study hard for more than 10 years to reach this level. "Although I don't understand why the prince wants us to do, since the prince told us to listen to young master, then we will follow young master's orders," the older person said. Yi Li nodded with a smile and said, "I didn't expect the prince to have so many hidden dragons and crouching tigers under him. He even has experts like you. But don't worry, it won't take up too much of your time. I only need you to give them some pointers in these 2 months. How about it? Is there anyone else who wants to try?" The people in front had been defeated so miserably, so the people behind naturally retreated. Yi Li was very satisfied and said with a smile, "Then, let's go for a run first. Do you see the field outside the courtyard? For your safety, I even had people plant snake-repellent grass. It's broad daylight, and there won't be any wild beasts with so many of you. Go around the courtyard and exercise." "So you're saying that there will be wild beasts at night?" Everyone looked at each other. Qin Feng looked at the people below and had to ask himself. "Wang. Young master, how much should we run?" Yi Li smiled sweetly, "Run until we're lying on the ground." Thus, a group of confused elites was pulled out for a run, although they didn't understand the meaning of this. But from a certain point of view, they were all soldiers, so they still understood how to follow orders. So, with 8 experts holding the line, dozens of people lined up to run in circles. Only Qin Feng was left behind, still confused as he looked at Yi Li, who was clearly in a good mood. Yi Li smiled and waved at him, saying, "Take a look. Get used to it for the next 7 days. I'll make adjustments later." Qin Feng looked down at the file in his hand. He could recognize the beautiful handwriting, but when he put it together, he didn't understand what it meant at all. Every morning and evening, there was archery, fighting, running, and so on. Even if he didn't understand, he could understand what it meant. But what were these parallel bars, push-ups, and so on? What did they mean and what did they do? In Qin Feng's view, apart from archery and fighting, the things written on this paper were basically useless. Yi Li said with a smile, "It doesn't matter if you don't understand. It also doesn't matter if you don't know. When Dark 2 and Dark 3 are free, I'll have them teach you. I originally planned on having Dark 2 lead these people, but when I think about it, you are the Black Cloud Cavalry's commander, so you definitely have more experience than Dark 2. That's why, when you have time, remember to make up for it." Seeing the innocent and sincere smile of the handsome youth in front of him, Qin Feng didn't know why, but he shivered. His intuition told him that the next few months wouldn't be easy. The 2 of them jumped onto the roof, perfectly able to see the scene outside the courtyard. Yili clapped her hands and sat down on the roof. She looked at the people running outside who were out of breath and shook her head. These are the elites of your Black Cloud Cavalry? Don't tell me you've ridden too many horses that you can't even outrun the Shadow Guard? Chapter 245. Qin Feng gritted his teeth. Of the 20 Shadow Guards, at least 15 of them knew martial arts, all right? Whoever dares to use Qin Gong, I'll make you fly to the top of the cliff and jump back down 20 times. Yili said with a smile as she stared at the Shadow Guards who were trying to trick them. The Shadow Guards who were secretly enjoying the sorry state of their companions couldn't help but feel their legs go soft and they almost fell to the ground. Regardless of whether he understood it or not, when Qin Feng left with Yili in the evening, he couldn't help but look back with pity at the Ding Kingdom's elites who were lying outside the wall and unable to get up. Hearing the howls of wolves and the roars of unknown beasts coming from the distant forest, Qin Feng couldn't help but think that for Wang Fei to find such a place so close to the capital, was it because the heavens didn't like them? Wang Fei, should this subordinate stay behind to look after them? Those experts were indeed experts, but none of them looked like they could control those arrogant elite soldiers. It would be troublesome if there was a conflict at that time. Yili smiled and said, "Don't worry, they won't be able to run out. Those who run out without permission will be treated as deserters. Am I worried that they will run away? I don't have time to look after them every day. It's fine to let them fight on their own in the beginning. It's fine as long as they don't kill anyone. 7 days later, I will let Shadow 2 and Shadow 3 take turns to teach them." Qin Feng was silent for a moment before asking, "This subordinate doesn't understand what Wang Fei wants to use them for. They can do a lot of things. Assassinations, intelligence gathering, guards, search, infiltration, ambush, rescue, and interrogation. No matter if it is land warfare, water warfare, field warfare, or street warfare, there is nothing that you can't think of that they can't learn." Qin Feng felt that his brain was a bit muddled. Even the soldiers of the Black Cloud Cavalry didn't know that much. Assassinations and intelligence gathering, aren't those the Shadow Guards? Why do they need to train other people? Is Wang Fei not satisfied with the Shadow Guards? Yili turned to look at his conflicted face and smiled. "It is good for everyone to do their own job, but I prefer to have a troop that can do anything." Qin Feng thought for a moment before replying, "If we can really do what Wang Fei says, then our battle strength can change completely." Yili shook her head and said, "The so-called elites are the minority. Just like the Black Cloud Cavalry, the skills that they learn are not something that most soldiers can grasp. Also, we don't need so much, it's just a waste of resources. You should remember that the people I asked you to choose are all literate. This is not something that most soldiers can achieve." Qin Feng nodded. In the army, even among elites like the Black Cloud Cavalry, only half of the people were literate. Qin Feng more or less understood what Yili meant. The princess consort wanted to cultivate a group of people who were proficient in both the pen and the sword. But what was the use of cultivating so many talents? That's right, Qin Feng. When they were about to reach the city gates, Yili stopped the horse and examined Qin Feng. "You were originally the commander of the Black Cloud Cavalry, so you should know one rule, right?" "What?" "Keep it a secret. What you see today and what you experience in the next 3 months, without my permission, you are not allowed to reveal it to anyone." Qin Feng couldn't help but swallow, including the prince. Including the prince. This subordinate obeys. When they returned to the Wang Fu, night had already fallen. Qin Feng had received a bit of a shock today and went to find an heir and Ensan for advice as soon as he returned. When Yili returned to her room, Mo Xiaoyao was reading a book under the light. Hearing the sound of footsteps, he raised his head to look at her. "You left the city?" Yili nodded and turned to wash up. When she came out, the originally empty table was already filled with steaming hot food. Qing Xia and Qing Shuang looked at Mo Xiaoyao, who was looking at them, and said with a smile, "Are you very free today? You're actually not busy in the study. Didn't the emperor summon you into the palace this morning?" The two of them were extremely busy after returning from the southern border. The emperor in the palace seemed to have a stroke. Even though Mo Xiaoyao hadn't officially gone to court yet, he summoned Mo Xiaoyao into the palace every day to discuss matters. There wasn't anything to begin with, it's just that our emperor likes to discuss matters with his subjects recently. Mo Xiaoyao said with a faint smile. He reached out to pull Yi Li to the table and indicated for her to eat first. Seeing that the table was filled with her favorite dishes, Yi Li smiled gratefully at him. Even though she wasn't really hungry, but having someone prepare food for her the moment she returned home was a good feeling. The emperor is prepared to hand over all matters regarding the marriage with the northern tribes to me. When Yi Li was almost done eating, Mo Xiaoyao said, "Hand it over to you." Yi Li frowned. After drinking the last mouthful of soup, she had the servants put the food away. She looked at him in confusion and asked, "What do you mean by hand it over to you?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, "It means that I will be in charge of everything, including receiving the northern tribe's envoys, confirming the marriage partner, preparing the dowry and sending the bride." Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, Yi Li couldn't help but frown. "You need to confirm the marriage partner to receive the northern tribe's envoys?" Mo Xiaoyao looked at her with a smile. "In reality, you need to be in charge of confirming the marriage partner. So these days, you will probably be very busy and won't be able to go out of the city." Yi Li weakly waved her hand. She didn't even need to imagine what would happen when the news spread out. Which noble in the capital would be willing to marry their daughter to the northern tribes, a barren place? She was afraid that tomorrow, the people who came to plead for her would break the threshold of the Prince Ding mansion. The worst thing was that she couldn't choose no one, but no matter who she chose, she would definitely offend people. So, the emperor wanted to make more enemies for the Prince Ding mansion? There are people watching over there, so I don't have to run out of the city every day. But what do you think about the marriage partner? Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and said, "The emperor's thoughts are hinting that the eldest daughter of the Hua family is the most suitable. The Empress Dowager prefers Princess Ronghua, but the Empress Dowager can't say anything now. In addition, the third daughter of the Lu family and Princess Shuncheng are also candidates. But they are not very eye-catching. I'm afraid the northern tribes won't agree." Yi Li frowned and said, "So, it is very likely that the final choice will be between Tian Xiang and Princess Ronghua? Since the emperor likes Tian Xiang, why didn't he make the decree himself?" Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, "He is now having a headache. So, he naturally wants us to offend people. I know that you and Miss Hua are good friends, so it's not a big deal to remove her. Later, you can just pick one of the princesses of the royal family. As long as people have selfish motives, Yi Li and Hua Tianxiang have a good relationship. So, naturally, she didn't want Hua Tianxiang to be chosen for the marriage." Yi Li couldn't help but feel annoyed when she was assigned the task of choosing a candidate for the marriage alliance. No matter who she chose to handle this matter, she would feel guilty. She would rather risk her life on the battlefield than handle this matter cleanly. Seeing Yi Li frown, Mo Xiaoyao just shook his head slightly and said indifferently, "Being in the royal family, they are supported by the people. Whether it is the marriage or dying on the battlefield, it is their fate. Li doesn't have to feel sorry." Chapter 246. Yi Li shook her head and said helplessly, "These princesses are all spoiled and pampered. Who knows how much they would suffer if they were to marry into the northern tribes. If the two countries really wanted to marry each other, then it would be fine. But this. It was obvious that it was just for show. Both countries knew that the princess was just a useless sacrifice. If the two countries did not marry each other, they would not fight for a while. If they did marry each other, it was impossible for them to not fight. It was just that they were not prepared for it yet. Yi Li was not someone who could not make decisions, but she hated this kind of meaningless sacrifice. Knowing that she was not in a good mood, Mo Xiaoyao did not continue this topic. He smiled and said, "What did you do outside the city today?" "You borrowed 8 experts from me and transferred people from the Mahist armies Black Cloud Cavalry and Shadow Guard. What do you want to do? Is Miss Li really not going to tell me?" Yi Li looked up and smiled, I am still in the experimental stage. I want to see what I can do in these few months. I will tell you when I have the results. If it doesn't work, I will return them to you. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a while and said, what does Miss Li want to train a group of people for? The shadow guards around you are all pretty well trained. Yesterday, the shadow guard commander even asked me if he could ask you to train his subordinates. I heard that in Yonglin, the two by your side took care of my shadow guard. It was just a sneak attack. Yi Li smiled. It is not easy to sneak attack. As a shadow guard, they were used to being in the dark and being on guard at all times. If these people could be sneak attacked by two people, it proved that they were stronger. Yi Li smiled, when this group of people comes out, I can send a few to be your guards. Mo Xiaoyao nodded, I will wait and see. If Miss Li can really train a group of experts, these people can be your guards. That's too wasteful. Yi Li shook her head and smiled. You'll know what they can do when the time comes. Just don't try to steal them from me. I hope they can exist openly in the army. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows in surprise. I thought Ali wanted them to become a secret force. Yi Li smiled faintly and said, of course, we still need to keep it a secret. However, what we need to hide is their numbers, where they are stationed, their true strength, and their detailed identities. We don't need to hide their achievements or their existence. If it was really as I imagined, their existence would be known sooner or later, and it would be impossible for them to hide. I hope that they will be rewarded like normal soldiers, and those who are capable will be promoted. The Black Cloud Cavalry was still a proper army, but the Shadow Guard was a bit of a scam. Except for a few who could stand out from the crowd, almost all the Shadow Guards could only be Shadow Guards for the rest of their lives. They didn't have an honorable identity, no promotion, no glory, no friends, and they couldn't even get married and have children. Most of them were too old to be Shadow Guards. Although they were supported by the king's palace, they weren't young anymore. Most of their lives were ruined. Like this, there weren't any traitors in the Ding King's palace's Shadow Guard. It could only be said that the ancient people placed great importance on loyalty and righteousness. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and thought for a moment before saying, we didn't treat the people by your side as Shadow Guards from the start. And he went to the army, and with his strength that could be considered outstanding among the Shadow Guard, it was only a matter of time before he stood out. And Si went to Xiling to handle some matters. As for the An and An San by your side, you should also teach them some of the things on the surface to handle. Yi Li smiled and said, whether it is their ability or intelligence, they are much stronger than most people. However, most of their lives can only be hidden in the dark. I feel that it is too much of a waste of talent. Moreover, the human heart is something that is very difficult to understand. Perhaps one day they won't want to hide in the dark anymore. If that day really comes, the consequences will be even more serious than not having a Shadow Guard. Therefore, if they have the ability and are willing to be used by me, I naturally can't treat them unfairly. Of course. If someone wants to betray me, I won't be merciful. Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment and said, Li's words are reasonable, but Li might not know that there are actually many large families that have their own hidden powers. Especially those like the personal Shadow Guard, they know too many secrets of their masters, so the control is very strict. In some families, the Shadow Guard who knows too much will be silenced in the end. Yi Li said, then it's also impossible to give the Shadow Guard the same military position or other ranks, and the same clear rewards and punishments. After a certain number of years, they will be transferred to the Black Cloud Cavalry or the Mahist Army. Mo Xiaoyao was a bit curious and said with a smile, what does Li have in mind? Yi Li said, if I am satisfied with the results of this training, these people should be able to serve before the age of 35. After 35, they will not be allowed to leave and will be transferred to the Mahist Army with the same rank. Of course, if they have other abilities and interests, they can also consider civil service or other positions. This is just a thought. In any case, the people haven't even been trained yet, so there is still time to consider this problem. Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyebrows and said, I understand, Lili wants to pave the way for their future, right? Yili nodded and looked at Imo Xiaoyao with a serious expression. I once heard a saying. The soldiers have already shed blood for the country, so they shouldn't be allowed to shed any more tears. There are also those retired veterans and injured soldiers, their days aren't easy. However, I can't care so much right now, so I have to at least settle down the people under me. Because she used to be a soldier, but the treatment in her previous life was naturally much better than the people in this life. In ancient times, being a soldier wasn't a glorious profession. Good men didn't become soldiers, and good iron didn't make nails. Many people joined the army because they had no other choice. Although I don't know why Lili would have such thoughts, I will think about it carefully. Mo Xiaoyao looked at the woman who was deep in thought and said softly. Early in the morning, Yili received the empress summons from the palace. In fact, she was already impressed by Mo Jingqi's patience that the emperor didn't summon her to the palace as soon as they returned to the capital. With Yili's current status, in the entire capital, other than the emperor, the empress, and the empress dowager, no one could casually request to see her. However, the empress dowager could be said to be under house arrest by Mo Jingqi. Last time, something happened when Yili entered the palace. Prince Ding could completely refuse the emperor's summons to Princess Ding, so he summoned her in the name of the empress. The empress summoned Yili in the name of admiring flowers. It was said that the begonia flowers in the imperial garden bloomed beautifully, so the empress ordered all the noble madams in the capital to welcome Princess Ding and admire the flowers at the same time. Seeing the flowers in the imperial garden, Yili vaguely remembered that this year's 100-flower festival had already ended. She couldn't help but smile. She was busy all day outside, so how could she still remember the festival that the noble ladies in the capital were longing for? Yili wanted to enter the palace, and Mo Xiaoyao didn't care whether he had received the empress invitation and directly followed her. It was obvious that he didn't trust the royal family. Mo Jingqi was so angry that his face turned black, but he couldn't say anything. After all, the matter of the Empress Dowager's disappearance had yet to be investigated. Chapter 247. Prince Ding, Wang Fei definitely won't be lost here at Ai's place. Could it be that you still don't believe in Ai? Empress Hua looked at the two people walking together and couldn't help but smile. Looking at Yi Li's eyes, there was a bit of sighing and envy, so she teased the two with a smile. Mo Xiaoyao and Hua family's relationship was originally close. Obviously, Mo Xiaoyao didn't have any ill feelings towards the empress. He faintly smiled and said, Li has never liked crowds. There are also no elders in our fu to teach her. It's inevitable that she doesn't know many things. I just happened to be idle today, so I accompanied her. Please don't blame the empress. Being so intimate in public made Yi Li look at Mo Xiaoyao a bit uncomfortably. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was as usual, still as gentle as jade. Seeing this, the noblewomen and young ladies present couldn't help but exclaim in admiration. For a moment, it wasn't known how many envious and jealous gazes were cast on Yi Li. Yi Li could clearly see Hua Tianxiang, who was standing beside the empress, gloating at her misfortune. She couldn't help but secretly glare at her. Even I feel honored that Prince Ding has followed your majesty here. However, those who came today are all women. If Prince Ding stays here, I'm afraid they will feel embarrassed. The empress looked at the two with a smile that wasn't a smile and said, therefore, Prince Ding should go somewhere else. Don't disturb Ai's banquet. Sitting on the side, Zhaoyang princess also smiled and said, Empress is right. When Ding King Fu's second Gongzi appeared, more than half of the capital's young ladies lost their souls. Xiao Yao shouldn't stay here and attract attention. With the empress and I here, are you still afraid that your Wang Fei will be harmed? Zhaoyang princess, who had always been a bit cold, was clearly in a good mood and actually started joking. The words that came out of her mouth made the young ladies present blush. They all lowered their heads, not daring to look at the outstanding figure standing in front of the empress. Seeing the different expressions on everyone's faces, Yi Li couldn't help but laugh in her heart. She looked at Mo Xiaoyao and said softly, If Prince has something to do, you can go do it. I'm not in the way. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said softly, I'll go see His Majesty first. I'll wait for you to return to the Fu together. Yi Li nodded. Only then did Mo Xiaoyao bid farewell to the Empress and eldest princess, turning to leave. Hua Tianxiang, who was standing beside the Empress, winked at Yi Li with a flirtatious look on her face. Being so lovey-dovey in public really made people hate them. After sending off the eye-catching Mo Xiaoyao, Yi Li sat down in the first empty seat next to the Empress. Opposite her, eldest Princess Zhaoyang smiled kindly at her, but Princess Zhaoran and Princess Ronghua were not so kind. In this regard, Yi Li was a little helpless. She didn't have any likes or dislikes for Princess Ronghua, but this princess seemed to look down on her, Princess Ding. In the past, when Yiying was here, most of the time, Princess Ronghua's firepower was concentrated on Yiying, but now that Yiying was gone, Princess Ronghua's attention was obviously back to her. Looking at the look of disdain in her eyes, Yi Li laughed in her heart. Does this Princess Ronghua know that a large part of her future may be in her hands? Imperial concubine Yun has arrived. Wang Xiaorong has arrived. Just as the Empress was about to speak, a sharp voice came from outside. The Empress couldn't help but frown. Obviously, she didn't like the people who came. Not long after, two well-dressed women leisurely walked over. The woman in the lead had a charming appearance and an exquisite figure. There was a hint of seductiveness between her brows. Although the woman beside her only had a delicate and pretty appearance, her pair of slender phoenix eyes outlined a hint of enchanting intent. The two stepped forward and bowed. These concubines greet the Empress. These two were the Emperor's favorite concubines. Imperial concubine Yun was one of the 4 concubines. Everyone present, except for Yi Li and the 2 princesses, had to stand up and greet her. The Empress glanced at the two and faintly said, "You may rise." Why did Imperial concubine Yun and Wang Xiaorong come? Imperial concubine Yun smiled and said, "This concubine has disturbed the Empress' mood." It's just that. This concubine and younger sister Wang heard that Princess Ding is also here today. This concubine has admired Princess Ding's reputation for a long time. Finally getting this opportunity, we asked the Emperor to come and greet Princess Ding. Imperial concubine Yun's words were said innocently, but she also pointed out to everyone that she came because of the Emperor's decree. Moreover, she specially came to see Princess Ding. Originally, when the Empress summoned a woman with a title, without an invitation, even concubines could not come before the age of 18. Her words not only washed away the accusation of looking down on the Empress, but also pointed out the Emperor's love for her. "I don't dare to greet you." Yi Li greets Imperial concubine Yun. Yi Li faintly smiled, but had no intention of standing up to greet her. The Yun family and the Wang family were Mo Jingqi's loyalists. The Empress was not trusted by Mo Jingqi. Noble consort Lu had a cold personality. Mo Jingqi wanted to test Yi Li, so he naturally sent Imperial concubine Yun. Imperial concubine Yun was slightly startled. She turned her head to look at Yi Li, who was sitting to the side. Most women always had some hostility towards women who were more outstanding than them. Before, Imperial concubine Yun was not very favored. Naturally, she had not seen Princess Ding. However, these days, she had heard many things about Princess Ding. The Yun family was originally loyal to the Emperor. Now that the Emperor had given up on the Yi family and supported the Yun family, he also doted on Imperial concubine Yun very much. Although Imperial concubine Yun did not overestimate herself and want to provoke the Empress and noble consort Lu, she did not care about ordinary people. Therefore, Yi Li, who seemed to be very afraid of the Emperor, naturally paid more attention to her. Originally, Imperial concubine Yun thought she would see a graceful and noble woman like the Empress or a beauty like noble consort Lu. However, when Imperial concubine Yun turned her head, she saw a woman sitting to the right of the Empress wearing a light green dress with silver peony patterns. Her black hair was casually tied up, and there were 2 pearl-tasseled hairpins in her hair. Compared to the beautiful clothes and exquisite makeup of the noble women present, she was more graceful and casual. It seemed that it was very difficult for people to connect her with the rumored woman who led 2,000 Black Cloud cavalry to guard the border city. It was even harder to imagine that Prince Ding seemed to dote on this princess very much. Imperial concubine Yun had also seen Su Zuidi. The Princess Ding in front of her was beautiful, but compared to the peerless Su Zuidi, she seemed to be lacking a bit. "This is Princess Ding. Your Highness the Empress, can this concubine sit with Princess Ding? This concubine has admired Princess Ding's elegance for a long time. I really want to have a good chat with Princess." Suppressing the confusion in her heart, Imperial concubine Yun smiled brightly, making people unable to refuse. The Empress glanced at her and faintly said, "Since it's like this, you and Wang Xiaorong can sit with Princess Ding." Imperial concubine Yun's eyes flashed, but she still happily agreed. Pulling Wang Xiaorong, she sat down next to Yi Li. Although she was unwilling to sit next to Yi Li, she also knew that Princess Ding would not give her a seat. Or it could be said that even if Princess Ding really got up to give her a seat, she might not really dare to sit down. The gathering between the noble ladies was more or less the same. It was just that there were many people with other things on their minds today. When most of the people had arrived, the Empress personally got up and led everyone to the Imperial Garden to admire the flowers. Sure enough, the Imperial Garden was filled with flowers. Although it was already the beginning of summer, the scenery did not lose to spring. The noble ladies sat in groups of 2s and 3s to chat and admire the flowers. Yi Li and the others with high statuses and naturally followed the Empress. After walking around the garden, the Empress led everyone to a pavilion in the middle of the Imperial Garden to sit down. Only then did the Empress ask with a smile, "Princess Ding rarely comes to the palace. What do you think of the scenery in the palace?" Yi Li smiled and said, "It's naturally rich and graceful, just like a paradise." The Empress glanced at her and said, "You're also speaking pleasantries with I. Rich and graceful is true, but just like a paradise, what kind of paradise would be like this?" Her tone was filled with irritation and indifference. Shaking her head, she said with a smile, "If it were up to me, it would be best to let nature take its course. The scenery in the palace is extremely beautiful, but with all these things gathered together, it is a bit dazzling. I have been to the Prince Ding mansion before. I think it must be to Princess liking." Chapter 248. The Ding Prince's mansion was very large, but the decorations were very comfortable and elegant. Yi Li was very fond of it. Zhaoyang Princess nodded her head in agreement, saying with a smile, "What the Empress says is correct. When I was young, I often liked to stay at the Prince Ding mansion. Every time, I was reluctant to return." Yi Li smiled faintly and replied, "Your Imperial Highness and Princess praise us too much. The Prince Ding mansion has been filled with military officers for generations. It is unavoidable that it is somewhat crude. The Prince and I do not like bustling places. We only seek peace and quiet." Sitting at Yi Li's side, Imperial concubine Yun curiously asked, "This concubine heard the Emperor say that Princess Ding once guarded Yonglin in Yongzhou and assisted the defending generals in resisting the Prince of Li's rebel army. Can Princess Consort tell us what happened at that time?" So it turns out that Princess Consort also knows martial arts. No wonder last year, you were able to frighten the Shilling Princess into a daze with a single arrow. Yi Li smiled faintly and replied, "Imperial concubine Yun is joking. It was only because the prince was worried about my safety that he learned some superficial martial arts. The ones guarding Yonglin were the soldiers at the border, not Yi Li." Wang Xiaorong smiled and replied, "Princess Consort is too modest. This concubine has also heard the Emperor speak of it. The Emperor also said that if it were not for Princess Consort's efforts, Shattering Snow Pass would have been lost long ago. Princess Consort has worked hard for the Dechu state. It is a pity that this concubine has lived in the palace for so long and is unable to contribute to the Dechu state like Princess Consort. It is truly a life's regret." Wang Xiaorong also wants to contribute to the Dechu state. "Why don't I ask Imperial Father to send you to the border to contribute to the Dechu state? With Wang Xiaorong being so loyal to the Dechu state, imperial father will definitely be very happy. Everyone turned their heads to see Princess Changel, who was wearing a pink dress. She blinked her bright eyes and giggled as she looked at Wang Xiaorong. Forcing a smile, Wang Xiaorong replied, "Princess must be joking. Your concubine does not have the strength to truss a chicken." Even though she was favored and placed in an important position by her family, Wang Xiaorong still did not dare to provoke Princess Changel. Princess Changel was the empress's only daughter, as well as the only legitimate child of the entire Dechu state's imperial household. Although Mo Jingqi did not dote on the empress, he still respected her. He doted on this innocent and cute princess even more. If Princess Changel were to run to the imperial study and spread rumors, then he would be in deep trouble. Princess Changel rolled her eyes. Disdainfully looking at her, she stated, "Then why are you still speaking so much nonsense? This princess thought that you were too embarrassed to tell imperial father. It just so happens that Uncle Prince Ding is also in the imperial study. This princess will help you ask imperial father. Perhaps imperial father will agree on account of your loyalty. Changel, cease your nonsense." Seeing Princess Changel's indecent actions, the empress frowned in displeasure. Making a funny face, Princess Changel stepped into the pavilion and properly paid her respects. Daughter pays respects to imperial mother. Greetings to Princess Ding and the two grandaunts. Zhaoyang Princess extended her hand to pull Princess Changel over. Smiling, she said, "It's been a long time since we last met. Little princess, you've grown into a young lady." With a smile, Yi Li led the way. It had only been a year since they last met, but Princess Changel had indeed grown considerably compared to when she had first met her outside Yaohua Palace. At the very least, she no longer appeared to be hiding in the bushes. Princess Changel clearly still remembered Yi Li lying in Princess Zhaoyang's embrace. She winked at her. Startled, Yi Li responded with a shallow smile. Imperial concubine Yun looked at Princess Changel, who was acting spoiled in Princess Zhaoyang's embrace. Smiling, she said, "Princess, we were just about to hear about the princess consort story of leading soldiers into battle at the border town. Does princess not wish to hear about it?" Princess Changel's eyes turned. Smiling brightly, she said, "This princess is a virtuous and virtuous woman. Of course, I would not pry into other people's private affairs. Only those wicked women who spend all day scheming and scheming against others would expend great effort to pry into other people's private affairs. Isn't that right, Imperial Concubine Yun?" The gentle smile on Imperial Concubine Yun's face was somewhat stiff. Forcing a smile, she said, "Of course the princess is a virtuous and virtuous woman." Princess Changel lightly snorted. Turning her head to the empress, she asked, "Imperial Concubine Mother, can this son invite Princess Ding and elder cousin to play?" Smiling faintly, the empress replied, "That will depend on whether or not Princess Ding has the time to play with you. You're not young anymore. All day long, you're pestering people to play with you. What are you thinking?" Smiling, Princess Changel replied, "This girl is very fond of Princess Ding." The empress turned her head to Yi Li and smiled. "This girl is not sensible. Princess, please don't laugh at her." Yi Li smiled and replied, "How can that be? The princess is pure and kind. To be liked by the princess is Yi Li's honor. May I know where the princess wishes to invite me to play?" Princess Changel joyfully left Zhaoyang Princess' embrace, pulling Yi Li with one hand and Hua Tianxiang with the other as she ran outside. "Follow this princess." Yi Li's nimble movements did not matter. On the contrary, Hua Tianxiang, being dragged along by Princess Changel, stumbled and fell. Behind them, the empress helplessly instructed the servants to follow and keep an eye on them. Princess Changel pulled the two through the imperial gardens, running all the way to the back of the rockery in the northwest corner of the imperial gardens before stopping. Turning her head, she saw that the palace servants had not followed them. Only then did she relax and frown. Softly complaining, she said, "These people are truly annoying. Following me everywhere." Yi Li smiled and replied, "They are following the empress and the emperor's orders." If they can't find you, perhaps they will be punished. Waving her hand, Princess Changel replied, "Don't worry. My imperial mother is a good person. She will not casually punish palace servants. However, those people are very annoying. They like to tell imperial father and the other concubines what I say. This princess hates them. The two of you, follow me." With a face full of smiles, Princess Changel climbed up the rockery. As she did so, she turned her head and said to the two, "This place is very large. If we climb up, they won't be able to find us." Yi Li looked around. This rockery was indeed quite large. If they hid here and did not look carefully, they might not be able to find them. However, "Princess, why are we climbing up?" Princess Changel turned her head to look at her. Stroking her hair, which was adorned with a string of pearls, she replied, "Uncle Prince Ding said that a bad woman has made you unhappy and wanted me to find a place to hide you. In a moment, he will come to pick you up. Also, doesn't elder cousin have something to tell you?" Yi Li did not know whether to laugh or cry. Hide her? She dared to bet that this was not what Imo Xiaoyao had told Princess Changel. Tilting her head, she looked at the similarly astonished Hua Tianxiang. Hua Tianxiang was also looking at Princess Changel. Princess Changel lightly snorted, turning her head to continue climbing. "Who is this princess?" "Imperial father wishes to marry elder cousin Xiangxiang to the northern tribes." I asked Mama. "The northern tribes is a very bad place. The people there are coarse and barbaric. It is cold and secluded. There is also no good food to eat. I went to beg Uncle Prince Ding. Uncle Prince Ding said that Princess Ding has the final say in this matter. As a result, we can speak now. Come on up." Helpless, the two could only follow her and climb up. Sure enough, there was a place halfway up the rockery where people could hide. Seeing how quiet it was obvious that there were people here often. Sitting on the rockery, Yi Li smiled and asked, "Therefore, Princess wishes to request that I not marry Tianxiang to the northern tribes?" Princess Changel gazed at her anxiously. "Will you agree?" Yi Li smiled. "What benefits would there be if I agree?" Thinking it over, Princess Changel replied, "This princess can give you all of my treasures. I have many treasures. They were all given to me by Imperial Father. Imperial Mother said that these things are very precious. Is that possible?" Chapter 249. Changel. Hua Tianxiang's eyes reddened. Of course, she did not want to be married off to the northern tribes. However, regardless of whether it was her father, mother, grandfather, or grandmother, they all knew that although the emperor had said that Princess Ding would be fully responsible for this matter, if he truly wanted her to be married off, even Li Ke would be powerless. She only wanted the Prince Ding mansion to bear the reputation of offending the Hua family. As a result, from the very beginning, neither her grandfather, grandmother, nor herself had any intention of speaking with Li Ke, only making things difficult for her. Why does Princess not want Tianxiang to be married off? Princess Changel bit her lip as she gazed at the two. After a long time, she hesitantly replied, "Imperial Mother said that only princesses can be married off. However, we currently do not have a suitable princess. As a result, we have to choose someone else for the marriage. Imperial Mother said that these are all matters of the Imperial clan. This princess is still young. Otherwise, this princess will personally go for the marriage. With cousin Xiangxiang gone, maternal grandmother, uncle, and aunt will be sad. Aunt will also cry in front of Imperial Mother." Princess Changel spoke intermittently, but both of them understood. Princess Changel believed that Tianxiang was going to suffer in her place in the marriage. As a result, she impatiently came to beg Yi Li. With great difficulty, Princess Changel finished speaking. Gazing hopefully at her, she asked, "Princess Ding, can you not have cousin Xiangxiang go for the marriage?" Yi Li smiled faintly. Nodding her head, she replied, "I can. I promise you." Hearing this, Hua Qianxiang stared blankly. Gently biting her red lips, she gazed at Yi Li. Her normally bright and beautiful eyes flickered with tears. She knew that Yi Li was in a difficult position. For the emperor to hand over such an important matter to the Prince Ding mansion, it appeared that he had great trust in the Prince Ding mansion. In reality, he had pushed the Prince Ding mansion to the heart of the struggle. Yi Li's easy acceptance of Princess Changle's request made Hua Qianxiang both happy and worried. Yi Li reached out to grasp Hua Qianxiang's hand, which was tightly tugging at her sleeve, and lightly patted it. Smiling, she stated, "A person's heart is always somewhat biased. What's more, it's a matter of offending people anyway. Why can't I choose something that makes me feel better?" Princess Changle did not understand what was so difficult about this matter. Cheerfully throwing herself into Yi Li's embrace, she smiled and said, "You really are a good person. This princess likes you." Yi Li's elegant eyebrows rose. Smiling, she asked, "If I do not agree, princess will not like me?" Princess Changle looked at Yi Li with an awkward expression. After struggling for a long time, she finally replied, "Imperial Uncle Ding said that you would agree. But even if you really don't agree, this princess won't blame you." Imperial Mother said. Imperial Mother said that no matter who you send, it's not your fault. Because this has nothing to do with you." Not expecting the Empress to say such words, Yi Li stared blankly for a moment. Pinching Princess Changle's small face, she smiled and said, "Thank the Empress for me." The Empress was right, so no matter who was sent to the marriage, it was not the princess's fault. "Princess, you don't have to be too sad." Princess Changle blinked her eyes. Hesitantly, she nodded her head and said, "If this princess grows up, this princess will personally go to the marriage." Yi Li's impression of princesses and princesses of the imperial household was not very good. She did not expect that this little princess would not only be cute, but also have such thoughts. Kneading her small, tender face, Yi Li smiled and said, "The Empress and the Empress would not be willing to part with the princess's marriage. Moreover, does the princess know what a marriage is? Going to another country will not be as comfortable as staying in the Dechu state." Princess Changle bared her teeth at Yi Li, grabbing the hand that was ravaging her face. She said in a muffled voice, "I know. Imperial Mother has told me that, as a princess, although I can enjoy glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, I cannot make my own decisions regarding marriage. Even Imperial Mother cannot. If, in the future, there is a need for a marriage and Imperial Father chooses Changle, Changle cannot cause trouble. This is because this is the responsibility of a princess." Hearing Princess Changle's words, Yi Li and Hua Qianxiang could only inwardly sigh. The palace was not a good place to talk. Even if the three of them hid in a secluded area, it was inevitable that groups of palace maids and eunuchs would search for them. Yi Li pulled Princess Changle to her feet. "Since we have finished speaking, let's go out." Taking the initiative to go out was much better than being found by others. If the stately imperial consort of the emperor and the little princess were to be seen hiding in the rock garden, she would lose all face. Naturally, Princess Changle also heard the shouts coming from afar. Her faintly elegant brows knitted together. "Imperial Mother will not always restrain me. These people are the most annoying. It's as if they are afraid that this princess will speak too much with them." Yi Li took the lead to descend from the rock garden. Turning her head, she carried Princess Changle down and then helped Hua Qianxiang descend. Walking out and seeing the palace maids rushing towards them, Hua Qianxiang helplessly smiled and said, "It is not convenient for me to come and find you right now. Originally, I thought that we could talk. It seems that the palace is truly not a peaceful place to talk." Yi Li smiled and replied, "What's so inconvenient about it? If you have the time, just come and find me." Thinking it over, Hua Qianxiang shook her head and said, "Forget it. I know that you don't have the time to play right now." Yi Li thought about how she had only been back for 2 or 3 days. She was truly too busy. Helplessly, she smiled and said, "It's been too long since I've been in the capital. I haven't even seen older sister Zheng yet." Hua Qianxiang curled her lips and said, "Sooner or later, you will be a family. Zheng has been detained by her mother in preparation for her marriage. Even if you want to see her, you won't necessarily be able to. Sweeping her gaze over the palace maids who had almost arrived, Yili laughed softly and said, "If you weren't so picky, everything would have been fine if the marriage had been set early." Hua Tianxiang stared blankly, her charming face immediately turning red. The palace maids who had been searching for Zheng had already arrived. She could only glare hatefully at Yili, unable to say anything. Returning to the pavilion, imperial concubine Yun and Wang Zhaorong were no longer there. The empress saw Hua Tianxiang's delicate face, which had yet to fade, and then looked at Princess Changel, who was winking at her. Understanding, she nodded towards Yili with some gratitude. Yili smiled faintly, pulling Princess Changel into the pavilion to sit down. Only Zhaoyang Princess, Zhaoran Princess, and Princess Ronghua remained in the pavilion. Although the other noble ladies wanted to plead for their daughters, they knew that the palace was not a place where one could do as they pleased. As such, they did not come forward to disturb them. As soon as Yili sat down, she sensed two unfriendly gazes directed at her from across the pavilion. As always, Princess Zhaoran was picky and contemptuous, while Princess Ronghua glared at Yili with even more resentment than her mother's. Yili picked up the teacup that a palace maid had just brought over. Just as she lifted the lid, Qingyu, who was behind her, suddenly spoke, Princess Consort has overworked herself recently and is weak and cold. Sir Shen has instructed that Princess Consort should avoid green tea." Yili's hand paused. Holding the teacup, she lightly inhaled. Regretfully, she sighed, "This is first-rate Longjing tea. It is a waste of Her Imperial Majesty's good tea." The Empress's eyes flashed, a trace of coldness flitting across her brow. Smiling at Yili, she said, "This Longjing tea is indeed good. However, the body is still more important. If you like it, I can have someone send some to the Prince Ding mansion." Yili was not polite. Smiling, she replied, "Then, many thanks to Her Imperial Majesty." "Imperial Majesty, please do not blame me for being greedy." Princess Changel sat in Yili's embrace. Blinking her clear eyes, she stood up and said, "Imperial Mother, Changel is going to practice calligraphy.